Hello, chat. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. Just a reminder that although I'm a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is for educational or entertainment purposes only. So if y'all have a concern or question, please go see a licensed professional. Welcome to another Healthy Gamers stream, everybody. Happy Friday. Apologies for Wednesday. I know we were planning on doing an interview, but you know, the powers that be made it so that we couldn't go live. We tried every 15 minutes for like 2 hours and it still wasn't working. But thankfully it's working now, so here we are. And we hope to be able to reschedule the interview and hopefully we'll get around to it. Offspring number 1, I'm here at the beginning of a stream for once. Awesome. Welcome. So yeah, Jonathan's 1212 saying, I really like yesterday's group stream. I did too. So I'm really enjoying the group streams. I know that they're not our usual kind of cup of tea, which is totally okay. I know they're not sometimes quite as entertaining or even in a sense educational. Like today we're going to be doing a lecture, for example. But I still think it's important to showcase, you know, what content creators struggle with, as well as how change really happens. So I appreciate that. You know, I know maybe about 25% or 30% of our viewers tend to watch those streams, which is totally fine. And hopefully for those of y'all that have watched, you can really see how change happens. Like someone comes in with a particular like attitude or idea, and over the course of a couple of weeks, we can start to see the gears in their head start to shift. And so hopefully that's educational for y'all. A couple of other reminders. So the ADHD guide launched this week, so be sure to check it out. So far, the feedback that we've gotten has been pretty positive. So I think people are appreciating it. I do think that in a lot of ways, the guide is a little bit more comprehensive or even denser. We struggled to make some of the videos or all of the videos entertaining. I think like 70-80% of them are quite entertaining, but 20% of them are like quite information dense, which is sort of what the purpose is, right? So it's like a one-stop shop for those of y'all that are very interested in neuroscience, because we get a lot of great questions about that. It's very neuroscience heavy, but also very practical and like how to, you know, how to find motivation, how to overcome emotional barriers, how to understand ego. We dig into a lot more advanced concepts in that guide, so check it out if that's your cup of tea. So a couple of other things. So thank you very much, 1008, for the sub. We really appreciate all the subs that y'all send our way to support the work that we do. Right now, for example, we have a first session on us promotion where HG will pay for your first session of coaching, and those kinds of you know, opportunities wouldn't be available without the support that y'all give us on stream. And so, you know, be sure to try it out if you've been kind of curious about it. If y'all have questions about it and things like that, you can also hop into Ask a Coach, which happens on our Discord periodically. And lastly, you know, remember that change takes time, and we tend to see optimal outcomes around the 12-week period, but statistically significant improvements in purpose, motivation, things like that. Actually, I don't know if we measure motivation directly. Let's say purpose, confidence in career trajectory, feelings of low mood and feelings of worry and things like that. All of those are statistically significantly improved at 8 weeks, and we really see them sort of maximize somewhere between the 12 and 16-week window. So be sure to check it out. So a couple of other things. So we're going to be at TwitchCon next week. Woohoo! So I've never been to TwitchCon, so I'm thrilled to be able to go. And we're going to be doing like some meetups and things like that. So if y'all are in the neighborhood and at TwitchCon, hopefully we'll get to hang out a little bit. So yeah, that'll be fun. I think we've got some stuff like meditation in the park scheduled or something like that. Like, so we're doing some stuff like sort of at TwitchCon, like, you know, we're running sessions at TwitchCon and things like that. But we hope to do a little bit more like, now that the pandemic is over, hopefully we can just hang out a little bit. So I'm really looking forward to that. We'll see how all that kind of stuff shakes out. So for today, we're going to be looking at a couple of posts from Reddit. And then we're also going to be doing a lecture on incels. And we're going to be talking a little bit. So we've been doing research on incels for probably about 2 years now. And we'd love to share with you like what we've learned. I know it's a charged topic. And so we're going to try to approach this in the way that we approach everything, which is try to understand it, try to ground it in as much science as we can get our hands on, and also try to approach the topic and pretty much everyone with as much compassion as we can muster. So I think that this is something that is like increasingly becoming a part of discussion. And as we'll discover that I think very few people are trying to understand the perspective of an incel. So incels tend to upset people with the way that they speak. We're not blaming the people for getting upset. I think a lot of what they say can be very toxic. And so what's sort of happening is there's this antagonistic relationship developing and no one's trying to understand them. And despite multiple calls by researchers and mental health professionals for like developing support programs from incels, like I haven't seen a single scientific paper about anyone actively trying to help an incel. So we're going to dig into that topic a little bit today. And y'all may be surprised. Thank you very much, White Lens and Anonymous Gifter, for the gifted subs. We really appreciate it. All right, let's dive in. Let me just see. Okay. All right, so what I'd love to do today is talk a little bit about incels. And what I'd love to do is share with y'all a little bit about what we've learned about how an incel is born. Where do they come from? You know, how does someone start out in life and what happens to them that sort of turns them into an incel? So we're actually going to start by something that popped up on the Reddits over the last 24 hours.
Man, so let's just pseudo-intellectual hero to the incel community. Incel being these
let's just take a look at this.
Loner men who are despicable in many ways. Is that you? Are you the intellectual hero to these people?
Sure, why not? You know, people have been after me for a long time because I've been speaking to disaffected young men. You know, what a terrible thing to do that is. I thought the marginalized were supposed to have a voice.
It's making you emotional. Talk about that.
Well, God, you know. It's very difficult to understand how demoralized people are. And certainly many young men are in that category. And you get these casual insults.
I want to pause for a second because I'm kind of curious, like, because based on all the titles that I saw on social media, I'm kind of curious, why do people think that Jordan Peterson is crying right now? Like, what do y'all understand about why he's crying? I'm kind of curious because my interpretation of this is it was quite different from what I thought social media was sort of. So like when I was reading, I see people are sort of saying crocodile tears. People are saying empathy. So like, I'm not surprised to hear y'all say that because I interpreted this as like empathetic crying. So I got the sense that what's going on here is that Jordan Peterson, to some extent, has spent time with people who maybe describe themselves as incels and like is trying to empathize and recognize that there are people out there who are suffering. And as he kind of says that, you know, like he's talking about them as a marginalized group, which we're not going to get too much into. But the really interesting thing is that I felt like the social media response was that he felt like insulted. And it's like, hey, you're a hero to all of these losers and despicable people. And so we don't need to kind of go more into that. But, you know, it got me kind of thinking a little bit about what's going on with incels and how do we as a society, how do we as the internet perceive these people? And like, what do we really know about them? So for the past couple of years, we've actually been doing research on incels. We've had a paper that we've been trying to publish for 9 months now. So we've had different pandemic related delays and things like that. But there are a fair number of people who are associated with or even describe themselves as incels in our audience and in our community. And so what we're going to share today is like the results of our research into this topic. We've also worked with probably hundreds, if not thousands, of incels at this point. And what we'd love to do is just approach this topic kind of the way that we approach all the other HG topics, which is to just talk about it, right? Let's try to understand the science. Let's try to understand what's going on psychologically. Let's try to understand these people, and let's try to figure out if there's anything that we can do to help the situation. So the first thing that I kind of want to start with is a lot of myths about incels. So this is kind of shocking, but nowadays incels are associated with men, right? So we sort of think of incels in a default capacity just as men. But it's kind of bizarre. If you look into the history of incels, the term incel was actually coined by a woman. And some studies suggest that up to 24% of incels are actually women. So the first bizarre myth, and I think that this could be changing maybe a little bit, but generally speaking, if you look at the term incel, which is a combination of involuntary and celibate, the original incels were actually groups of women. And as the term kind of spread, it started to become kind of more dominant by men. But even up to this day, it's a little bit unclear because statistics over the past couple of years, we don't really have great statistics. But, at least maybe about 5-10 years ago, about 25% of incels were actually women. So I thought that was pretty shocking. Another, really common myth is that incels are by definition kind of violent. And I understand where this comes from because there have definitely been cases of incredibly terrible acts of violence perpetrated by male incels against people who were completely innocent. So one thing that we actually found in our research was that about 30% of the research articles that we looked at, or 30% of all of the articles of incels, now this is about 2 or 3 years ago, were actually devoted to the fraction of people who are violent. So for example, you would have manifesto analyses that were published. You would have papers published in criminal justice papers and things like that. But it's kind of interesting because actually a tiny fraction of incels are, at least as far as we know, violent. Just to put things in context, between 2009 and 2019, there are 53 deaths that have been attributed to incels. So is that a large number? Absolutely. Is it terrible that incels have done this kind of thing? Absolutely. But my guess is that there are between hundreds of thousands and millions, if not tens of millions of incels in the world today. And chances are a tiny fraction of them are actually violent. So the next thing that we sort of found was that as we were looking at the research on incels, almost none of the research was actually based on talking to incels or any kind of substantive clinical interaction with incels. So what we tend to see, as I already mentioned, 30% of studies around criminal justice and analysis of manifestos written. A lot of the research was cross-sectional surveys. So they'll sort of send people a survey. They'll do an internet survey on people who describe themselves as incels. These are situations where they're pre-generated questions which incels can kind of agree or disagree with. But we weren't able to find a really good single study that was a really good qualitative exploration or clinical exploration of what it's like to be an incel. There's even a group of researchers that developed an incel trait scale. So they developed a 20-item scale to measure the amount of incelness. The interesting thing is what they based that scale on is not even by talking to a single incel. They based that scale on journalistic descriptions of incels. So the first shocking thing that we discovered when you look at the majority of research on incels is everyone who's doing research on incels or publishing papers on incels is not actually talking to incels. There are no open-ended discussions about, hey, what's going on with you? How did you get to believe this? Where are these views coming from? What is your day-to-day life like? What do you struggle with? It's all one step removed. And the best quality data actually comes from online cross-sectional surveys, which if y'all have done research before, you recognize is actually very, very weak data. So the other interesting thing is that if you look at a lot of the research, what you find is that several papers will call for these kinds of explorations. They'll even say that, incels need to be rehabilitated. We need to offer more mental health support. We need to offer clinical support for these kinds of people. But we weren't, despite the fact that there are numerous calls for this kind of thing, I haven't seen a single study that sort of looks at any kind of like treatment trial for people with incels. And instead, what we tend to see is situations a lot like the video that we saw today, where any kind of description of incels tends to come with a complete lack of compassion. And we'll get to kind of why that is down the road. And there may actually be good reasons for that. But this is sort of what we discovered in the research, right? Is that like there's actually like no one is actually talking to incels or trying to understand what their viewpoint is. And so that's something that we've kind of been focused on. So we've interviewed incels on stream before. I think those are some of our most bizarrely powerful, positive, and like give us hope for humanity kind of interviews that we've done, which I know sounds kind of weird because incels get such a bad rap. But my overwhelming experience with incels has been that these are people that like kind of got off on the wrong track and have very low self-esteem about themselves, but with some kindness and some support can sort of become healthy members of society. That's been my overwhelming experience. Now, I'm not saying that's true of all incels. This is anecdotal, but that's kind of what I've seen. So then what we tried to do is try to discover, okay, like what are the features or factors that get people to become an incel? And what I'd love to do today is to dive into how we've sort of developed a kind of trajectory that starts very early in life based on what we know on research. And how does like, let's say a small child grow up to be an incel? And what I'd love to do is share that with you today. So this actually starts with a shocking amount of early childhood adverse experiences. So if you look at the research on incels, the vast majority of them have adverse childhood experiences that are on average significantly worse than like kind of the average person. So what we're talking about is that incels will very, very commonly describe bullying or persecution by peers at a very young age, right? This is even before they're incels. So we're talking like 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, experienced a lot of bullying, a lot of persecution by peers. There's also a very high level of neglect or in some cases, even abuse by parents, although neglect seems to be common. So if you take 100 incels or 1,000 incels and you ask them, what was your upbringing like? A lot of these people are coming from situations where they were bullied, persecuted, or even neglected by their parents. So this leads to some really interesting changes in their personality. So there's also research that looks at like 5-factor personality analysis of incels. And what people have hypothesized, or what we sort of know, is that incels have low amounts of extroversion and high degrees of neuroticism. And so what that sort of means is that they're shy. They're kind of like they have difficulty putting themselves out there. They have difficulty, sort of going into social situations. They're also highly neurotic, which means that their tendency to worry about things up here is very, very high. And there are even some papers that suggest, some researchers that suggest that these two things are linked. That when you have persecution or neglect early in childhood, it sort of leads into low levels of extroversion or high levels of neuroticism. There are other aspects of incel personality which has been looked at. So one is that incels tend to be highly, highly rejection sensitive. So this is also where we're a little bit unclear, how much of this is due to that early persecution and neglect in childhood, and how much of it is sort of like more temperamental or biological. We're not really sure. But we do know that in general, incels are more sensitive to rejection than the average person. We also see a lot of unhealthy attachment styles in people who describe themselves as incels. So remember that attachment theory is the theory of psychology that governs the way that we form intimate relationships. And if you look at people who struggle to form, maintain, or even kind of like, struggle to form or maintain intimate relationships, these are not just sexual relationships or romantic relationships, that incels tend to have very, very high levels of disordered attachment. So what I kind of want to point out is before you even get to any of the incel beliefs, any of the incel toxicity, any of the reason that society really dislikes incels, what we sort of have to acknowledge is that from a very early age, these people were dealt like a pretty bad hand of cards, okay? Now, this may not be true of all incels. So like, remember, this is like cross-sectional large-scale research that sort of looks at things at points in time. We're not entirely sure about the causation here, right? So maybe the early childhood experiences don't one-to-one correlate with like low extroversion later in life. But the really interesting thing, if you really look at sort of the early development of people who will later become incels, is it does seem to be characterized by a lot of persecution and neglect, followed by personality changes or personality features that make it difficult for them to form relationships. So this kind of leads to a vicious cycle, okay? So let's say I'm a kid, I got bullied and persecuted, my parents were neglectful, and remember that neglect is more common than abuse, and what does that actually look like? What it looks like is that, let's say I'm getting bullied by people at school. If I have a warm and involved parent, that parent will step in some way and either coach me on how to like form healthy relationships, encourage me to stand up for myself, encourage, like facilitate play dates. Like, okay, if these kids are bullying me, like let's have a birthday party where we don't invite your bullies. But what we see from research on incels and also the work that we've done with hundreds of them at this point is that their parents like never did that kind of thing, right? Their parents were kind of AFK. So when a child struggles in life, a healthy, involved parent will course correct. But what we're sort of seeing is a combination of bullying plus neglect from parents, which kind of makes it so that the child doesn't really like know how to engage in social interactions. So this sort of leads to something, this leads to a cycle of social rejection, followed by social withdrawal, and then fundamental social skills atrophy as people grow older. So what that kind of means is that like early on I get bullied, right? And then once I start getting bullied, like I start to withdraw into myself. So I'm not going to reach out to other people. I'm not going to engage with them because that tends to go bad. And then as my social contact decreases, my social skills start to atrophy. Then I don't know how to talk to people. Forget about women. We'll get there in a second. But I just don't know how to talk to anyone. Like I don't know how to connect with other human beings. I don't know how to have a conversation. And remember that incels tend to have high neuroticism. So anytime I'm in a social situation, I'm more prone to beat myself up. The other kind of really interesting thing is that the high level of rejection sensitivity will make incels even interpret benign, neutral interactions as negative, right? So this is like a really interesting cognitive bias, which we'll also kind of get into. But what this all sort of snowballs into is a social skills atrophy that then leads to missed developmental milestones. And now we start to get into some of the incel beliefs. So a core feature that we found in the development of an incel is missed developmental milestones. So these are people who never went on a date or like never went to a dance, let's say when they were 13 years old, right? So they like didn't really learn how to talk to girls. They never went on a date in high school. They've never kissed anyone by the end of college. And this is where some of the thinking of an incel starts to step in, because despite the fact that these are missed developmental milestones, the truth of the matter is that you can fix any of those developmental milestones, right? So like I tried to date a little bit. Like I went on my first real date when I was like 18 years old. I had never dated anyone in middle school, never dated anyone in high school. Tried to date for a couple of years and then like found my first girlfriend when I was 21. Like I didn't really go on more than one date with a single girl, maybe more than one, but until I was 21 years old. The key thing about all these developmental milestones is it's actually very, very common for a large portion of the population to miss these quote unquote developmental milestones. The thing is that those developmental milestones can be like, you can catch up, right? So you can start dating in your 20s. You can have your first girlfriend when you're 25 or even 30, or maybe even enter a long-term committed relationship for the first time at the age of 32. All those kinds of things can be caught up. But what happens with incels is they start to believe, and we'll get to this a little bit more later, that missed developmental milestones, once that window is gone, that you can never catch up. That effect of never having kissed someone in high school means that you are doomed forever. So there's kind of this like determinism, this belief of a determinism about if I've missed a particular window, I'm screwed for life. What we then tend to see is that as incels, so this is another phenomenon that we sort of found a lot in the research, is as incels start to socially withdraw, miss developmental milestones, they start to feel more and more isolated and lonely, they turn to the internet. And I think this is a huge reason why incels are essentially increasing linearly or even exponentially with like internet, right? So like 50 years ago, there were kids who got bullied, never went on a date in high school, never went on a date in college, and they still ended up kind of okay. Maybe some of them didn't. But what we're sort of seeing in with incels is that they're actually like increasing at a very rapid rate compared to how they used to be like historically 50 years ago, 60 years ago, right? All of the developmental risk factors for becoming an incel existed 50 years ago, but they didn't quite turn into incels at the rate that they're turning into now. So what's changed? Why are we seeing so many incels? And the answer is the internet. So the internet has done a couple of really, really interesting things. The first is that as my social skills atrophy, before the internet, if I like didn't know how to socialize in high school and I went to college or I started working, I had no escape, right? So I was forced into social interactions and other people were forced into social interactions with me. So even if I fell behind a little bit, the nature of person-to-person contact, human contact, necessitated catching up on those social skills. Whereas now we have the internet, we have friends on Discord, we have online communities, we have, Reddit and 4chan and all kinds of different places. And so when I feel alone, I'm not required to engage with other human beings. I can work as a freelancer online. I can submit stuff over DMs. I can get paid over PayPal. And so now we live in a world where you're not required to catch up on social skills. So that's the first thing. The second thing is there's a really interesting feature called online drift, which we've sort of noticed on the internet. And what people, like researchers who've studied kind of the trajectory of people through social networks on the internet have discovered this phenomenon called online drift. And what it basically means is that if you're someone on the internet, you start out in a pretty neutral place. But over time, chances are you will move in a more polarizing direction. And online drift is part of the reason that like the internet is such a mess that it is today. So if you look at like Twitter, like no one is having constructive discussions on Twitter, right? What's the stuff that gets upvoted the most or downvoted the most? It's the stuff that's the most controversial. And so now we have these like, Twitter icons who are really, really good at like appealing to their base and getting these armies of stans to fight each other. And so what we see specifically, there are also like very subtle neuroscience elements to online drift, which is that when I look at some kind of emotionally engaging content, a certain kind of content will be like emotionally engaging and will activate me, so I'll click on it. But if I watch that kind of content for, let's say, 10 hours a week, then it doesn't engage my emotions the way that it used to. There's a natural tolerance that builds up in my brain from a certain level of content. And so over time, what I actually need to do is watch more and more emotionally charged stuff. And this is where, like, I don't know if y'all have ever been down the YouTube rabbit hole, right? But you watch one video and then like YouTube will present you with other things. And each thing that they present you with, you're going to gravitate towards things that are more and more and more extreme and weird and more niche. And we see this in incel communities as well, where they'll start out sort of saying, hey, I'm struggling, like I'm alone, I've never had a girlfriend before. And then something interesting specifically happens with incels is that a lot of when they say things like this, like the early stages of an incel, what they're met with by the internet is, generally speaking, blame, rejection, and a complete lack of compassion, right? Even if you look at this interview today, incels are described as despicable. They're described as weirdos, right? Like, so they're ostracized by society in general. And so the more that they get ostracized, the more they get banned from places, which we've even had to do in our community. And we'll get to why that is and how we try to balance that. The more that they get banned, the further that online drift kind of kicks in. So now, like, I make one statement that is like, let's say, partially misogynistic or maybe misogynistic. And there's someone who's kind of very sensitive to that, or maybe it was an inappropriate statement. I get banned. Instead of people educating me, hey, you can't say things like this. Here are the reasons why, right? Because it's not an internet mod's job to explain to you why what you do is offensive. What the internet mod's job is to do is to police the speech and kind of like keep things appropriate for whatever the discussion that they've laid out is. So as they get banned, they get pushed further into like radicalizing communities. And then since the incels have been banned from all the other corners of the internet, they all wind up in one place. And so then what happens is they're in an echo chamber, right? Where all of these people have been neglected, rejected by people, are highly neurotic, even perceive things that are completely neutral interactions as rejections. And when you get 50 of those people in a room and no one else talks to them, now these experiences start to become facts. And so as these incel communities form, they start to like repeat things back to each other over and over and over again. And then they end up with a set of core beliefs. So next up, what we're going to do is talk about what are the core beliefs of incels and what do they believe about themselves and what do they believe about the world. So the first thing to understand is that they do hold beliefs that tend to be quite rigid. And we've kind of explored these beliefs. We've basically asked incels, like, what do you believe about yourself? Like, what kind of person are you? And the first belief that they hold is that they've permanently missed key developmental milestones. We've already kind of talked about that, but they believe that if I've never kissed a girl by the time I'm 18, I'll never learn how to kiss a girl. Like, it's too late, okay? So they believe that missed milestones are permanent in nature. They also believe that they lack the personal qualities necessary for sexual success or romantic relationships. And this is where there's a lot of, the best term I can come up with is pseudoscientific biological determinism. So that's a mouthful, so let me explain it. So they hold these beliefs that like basically I'm never going to be able to be like sexually successful or romantically attached because of these biological factors that are out of my control. Now, why do I call it pseudoscientific? It's because I've talked to tons of incels and I've asked them, okay, like, so, you believe that you're never going to be able to get laid because of your chin. Like, help me understand, like, where did you learn that? Oh, it's like biologically true. It's like evolutionary theory and mate selection. I'll be like, okay, so like, what did you, tell me what you read. Like, which papers are you taught? Like, where did you learn this? Like, where's the actual science? And to date, I've never gotten a single good answer to any of that stuff. So it's like some of these like weird pseudoscientific concepts like alpha males and beta males, right? Which the original person who wrote the paper in wolves, by the way, and I don't know if I need to explain this, but just because something is true of wolves does not mean it's true of humans. And furthermore, the original researcher who came up with the terms alpha and beta spent the rest of his career trying to explain to people that it's not that simple. So essentially what happens with incels is they start to believe these like things that, okay, I'm never going to be able to get laid. And when you ask them why, they will attribute it to like pseudoscientific concepts. The next thing that they tend to believe about themselves is that their inherent value as a human being is tied to their sexual experience. So if I sleep with a bunch of people, then I am worth more than someone who sleeps with no one. And like they sort of intrinsically tie value with like number of sexual partners. Well, sort of, because especially in the male incel communities, it's kind of inverse for the women, right? So like a man who sleeps with 100 women is like a Chad, but a woman who sleeps with 100 men is like the worst kind of woman you can possibly have. So they sort of have these weird, I don't know, but weird is fair. That's kind of a judgmental statement, but they sort of tie together intrinsic value with like your amount of sexual experience. Another thing that they tend to believe is that sexual attention is a right or entitlement. So this is where I think we really start to get a lot of the friction and toxicity and why people have a lot of difficulty engaging with incels, is because incels will believe that they're entitled to sex in some way, but that because of these factors that are outside of their control, right? So biological determinism and all kinds of other things, that they are denied a fundamental like right that they have. Like all human beings, all animals exist on this planet to have sex and procreate. That's why we're all here, right? But because of these factors outside of my control, I'm not able to do that. So that leads to a lot of resentment. That resentment leads to a lot of like toxic feeling. And then that toxicity comes out in the way that they interact with people, which then explains why people have so much difficulty being compassionate towards incels. So what are the kinds of things they believe about the world? So one thing that they believe is that there's like this sexual marketplace or dominance hierarchy kind of thing. So they believe that there's like basically the high value people and the low value people. And when I've talked to incels about this, they'll cite some really interesting statistics, but I think these statistics are kind of off. And I'll explain to y'all why. So I was talking to one incel and I was sort of saying like, oh, like, so you believe in this like sexual marketplace, right? Where human beings are kind of high value and low value. Help me understand what you base that on. So one person I was talking to is like, oh, like actually this is very well validated. They were so happy that I asked them for a source because they could provide one. And so what they did is they looked at Tinder, I think it was Tinder, and they sent me some info on Tinder. And they said 20% of the men on Tinder date 100% of the women. Or the other way to look at it is 100% of the women only date 20% of the men. Now you look at this statistic and they say, you see, women are really selective. Like, and the way that they interpret this is that there's one dude out there who is having sexual relationships with 5 women. And they're like, this is the coveted person, right? There's one dude out there who's getting laid and he's taking 4 of the women. And one of those women is mine by entitlement. Now, the interesting thing is I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, let me tunnel down into the research. So here's what I discovered. What I discovered is for every 100 men on Tinder, there are about 20 women. So if we break these apart into 5 groups of 20, right? So let's assume each of these is 20. It's not that one person is dating 5 women. It's that it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Like all of these relationships are just 1-to-1. Does that make sense? So like you can look at the percentages, but the reason that women will, let's say on average, date only one person at a time. So it's not like one man is dating 5 women and getting laid and like all these people are like, it's just a 1-to-1. Actually, like it's 1-to-1. The difference is that the number of men on Tinder far outweighs the number of women. So it sort of makes sense that only 20% of them, like the percentage of men that are going to date women depends on how many women there are. If there were 100 women, then chances are that it would be 50-50. Does that make sense? Do y'all get that? So like this is a prime example of like where what I've sort of noticed amongst incels is like a strong cognitive bias that interprets the research based essentially on an emotional experience. So what I've sort of found is that these people like have some very, very challenging negative experiences early on where they get rejected, right? And then they have low self-esteem. And then they go into social situations that are neutral. But because of the neutral social situation where it's like, so I once talked to someone who was like, I've liked this girl for 2 years. I've had a crush on her for like 2 years. And I think I'm getting stories confused. So let's say like, I've liked this girl for 6 months, one of my coworkers. Okay. So I've had a crush on her. I'm friends with her. We talk all the time. And this new guy started working there. He's been there for 2 weeks and he asked her out on a date and she said yes. And the guy is furious because he's like, doesn't she consider my feelings? And so this is the kind of thing, well, they'll take something that I think is relatively benign, right? It's not like she rejected him in any way. Turns out he never asked her out. Why did he never ask her out? Because he's rejection sensitive and he's afraid that she's going to say no. And by the way, he never learned how to ask her out because he didn't go to dances when he was 12 and 13. And he didn't learn how to talk to girls. And then when his parents when he was 15 or 16 and he was never going on dates, his parents never sat him down and said, hey, like, are you having trouble finding dates? Like, hey, let me teach you how to talk to girls, or like, let's talk about like how to do this, or let's fix this, because he had neglectful parents. And then he ends up 21. He doesn't know how to ask someone out on a date. There's a relatively neutral experience, which is that the girl considers him his friend because he's never made any romantic gestures towards her. She's like totally cool. And then someone comes in, asks her out, and she says yes. But they interpret this neutral interaction as a rejection. Right? Even these kinds of statistics where there's 20 women and 100 men, they interpret this as a rejection. And then what happens is once they're like emotionally hurting, there's a very simple principle that once you're emotionally active, once you're resentful, you will filter the data to support your emotions, not the other way around, right? The data doesn't actually change your beliefs. What happens is your beliefs change the data. And this is what I've seen in pseudoscientific biological determinism when it comes to incels. Okay? Now, So the next thing is that when it comes to these kinds of beliefs, like another thing about the sexual marketplace is you'll also see that incels will generalize women, right? And they'll sort of make these general statements like all women want this, or, like this has been scientifically proven based on evolution that like women prefer this over this. But that too is like, I don't know how to say this, that's just a grossly incorrect interpretation. So you can do a survey where you poll 1,000 women and ask for their preferences, which is where most of this data is. It's like surveys of women. But when you actually look at relationships, it's not like what surveys polling women, what their preferences are, they don't necessarily date that, right? Like, so I don't know how to say this, but like, I want you to just go to a Walmart, right? And like go to a Walmart or go to a grocery store and just look at the people that you see. Look at the men you see, look at the women you see, look at the families you see, and try to see if like, are the people who are getting laid and having kids, does that support or go against what you believe about mate selection? Because the truth of the matter is that most human beings are average. Most human beings end up with average people, and most human beings will procreate with like average people and create average kids. It's not like one dude is having sex with 10 women and fathering a bunch of kids. Now, those people may exist. I'm not saying that they don't. But in general, that's not really the case, right? Most of the time, it's like somewhat monogamous relationships. Divorce rate, at least in the US, is like 50%. So people will have a couple of sexual partners here or there. But it's not like this weird, feast or famine kind of picture that incels think it is. And then the question kind of becomes, okay, if it's not like that, why do they think that? It's because that's how they feel, right? So every time they go outside and they see a pretty woman with an attractive man, they're like, oh my God. And that sticks in. But what they don't acknowledge is like all of the average looking dudes with average looking women out there, right? So they have a cognitive filter or a cognitive bias that's very selective about their interpretations. So a couple of other beliefs that they have about the world, they believe, generally speaking, that feminism is bad and is partially responsible for like why incels have difficulty having success in sexual relationships or romantic relationships. And the last thing that they believe is that society is unwilling or unable to help them. And that, I think, is like a really good example of something that's actually quite accurate, right? Because what we tend to see, and now we're going to get into this, is that when incels share that I'm hurting in some way, society, generally speaking, is unwilling or unable to help them. And we kind of see this well showcased with like the Jordan Peterson interview, at least the part that I watched, is that generally speaking, like this is a group of people that we've decided as a society doesn't deserve help, right? Like screw those losers who can't get laid. Like fuck them, right? And let's try to tunnel down before we sort of say like, okay, like, is that bad? I personally think it's bad. I think that we should have compassion towards all human beings. But I think that if we really want to be fair about this, we have to tunnel down into why society reacts that way to incels. And more importantly, what incels actually do that provokes that reaction. So what we tend to find is that incels will make statements that are toxic or hurtful to others and will invite rejection. Right? So if I show up and I start saying like all women are ... yada, 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 sexual marketplace, this, that, I can't get laid. I deserve to get laid, but it's not my fault. Society is against me. My chin is too small. So they speak in such a way as to not invite compassion, right? And so there are a lot of actually interesting psychological, as I've tunneled down into this, I've realized there's actually a lot of really interesting psychological stuff going on. The first is a psychological phenomenon called the repetition compulsion, which essentially means that if we experience something early on, we will tend to repeat unhealthy behavior to create the same results. So a good example of how we sometimes see the repetition compulsion is in cases of people who have been in abusive relationships. So what we tend to see is that if someone's been in an abusive relationship, there is a far greater likelihood that they will end up with another abusive partner as opposed to a healthier partner. Which is kind of weird, right? You're like, why on earth, if I've been abused by a partner and I start dating someone who's healthy, like, why am I more likely to end up with someone who's abusive than someone who's actually like healthy and treats me well? And as like psychologists and psychiatrists have tunneled down into that, we made some really interesting discoveries. So early on, what human beings tend to do is they come up with a script of how a relationship works. And so if you've worked with people, like, so I've worked with a lot of people who have very low self-esteem, and they've been abused by their parents, abused by their first or second, let's say, partner, right? And then like part of the reason they started dating that person is because like they understood how that works. The person would love bomb them and then call them like really nasty things, which is exactly what their parents did. So they think, okay, like this is what an intimate relationship looks like, right? Because my parent was drunk and used to say all kinds of nasty things, but then they would feel guilty the next day and they'd like buy me lots of toys and presents. And then now I'm starting to date someone who does the exact same thing. So I know this game. Oh, this makes sense to me. And then when that person who's been abused enters into a healthy relationship with a healthy person, and that person doesn't ever flip out on them, what do you think is the emotional reaction of the abused person? Is it delight? Is it relief? Absolutely not. It is terror. It is fear. It's like, wait a minute. This person is being so nice for so long. And in my mind, the amount of niceness correlates with the amount of abuse, right? Because the worse that my parents used to abuse me, the more they would love me the next day. The guiltier they would feel. And this person, like, they're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then what happens in these relationships is that the person who's been abused will start to sabotage the relationship. They'll try to test. They're like, this is BS, right? Let me try to pull off the mask. They'll start to act out. They'll start to do things. They'll start to invite the abuse in particular ways because they're like, wait, this is weird. You're supposed to start abusing me at some point. Why isn't this working? And what they end up actually doing is self-sabotaging. They'll end up sabotaging the relationship because they're testing the other person. Like, why are you treating me nicely? Like, what am I missing? What am I missing? I'm crap, right? Like, so now I'm going to start acting out to uncover your mask because you're playing the long game. But if I start testing your limits, like, you're actually going to you're going to get mad at me and then it'll all make sense. And so what we almost see is something very similar with incels, where what they'll do is they'll start to engage in a relationship and then they'll kind of test the waters. They'll make a couple of statements. And then what happens is we'll reject those statements. And if we don't reject those statements, like the incel will amp up, right? And then eventually we'll sort of they'll force us to kind of reject them by saying more and more toxic things. And where did they learn all those toxic things? Because that's what gets said in their safe space, right? This is the intimate community of 4chan where we say all kinds of toxic stuff and this is accepted. So this is like my closest social connections involve sharing of these opinions. So now when I go outside of the world, I'm going to sort of test those relationships. I'm going to test those boundaries. I'm going to share my beliefs. And then what happens is I get rejected. When I get rejected, I go back into the waiting arms of my incel community and I say, I knew it, right? This is exactly what the world is. And now we see something that's even more devastating, which is a very, very careful selection bias. Not everyone who starts on the trajectory of an incel ends up as an incel. And so what happens is the people who don't get rejected integrate into normal society and they no longer call themselves incels, right? We'll even see this on our subreddit where people are like, I've been having some incelish thoughts recently and I don't know what to do about them. And so what happens is the people who don't end up getting rejected and integrate into society leave the incel community. And so over time, what happens is it's only the people who got rejected that go to the community, sort of spread those kinds of resentments. It becomes truth. And so the whole community gets more toxic. And as those people start to try to reintegrate, they're carrying more of that toxicity with them. Okay? So it's almost like the community becomes a distillation, a concentration of all of the things that society rejects. And as it becomes a distillation of everything that society rejects, the incel feels more and more and more rejected. But remember that this rejection, this is almost like, I don't know if this makes sense, but this is playing out the repetition compulsion of the 6-year-old on the playground, right? Because I got rejected then, and then becoming rejected becomes a truth for me, a fundamental truth. And then I'll incite people to reject me. Okay? Now, the last thing that I kind of want to talk about is what do we do now? Okay? So it's fine to explore all this stuff. I feel pretty confident in the findings of our research paper, which hopefully will be published sometime soon. But I think there are a couple of major issues that we just all need to kind of consider. The first is that when incels enter normal spaces, they tend to bring hurt with them. They tend to say things that are hurtful and toxic towards other people. They dehumanize women. They tend to be like very like general about particular things. They tend to speak on these global truths that are not really conducive to discussion, or, you know, like they don't engage people in dialogue, and they'll oftentimes say hurtful things. And so when an incel shows up to someone and says all women are ... and says something derogatory, the rest of society will be like, will be hurt by that, right? Like it's toxic, it's judgmental, it feels bad to hear that. So then what we do as society is we reject that person, which is understandable, because like they're coming in, they're saying really nasty stuff. And then like what we're going to do is like when someone slaps me across the face, what do you expect me to do? I'm going to slap them back, right? Like I'm not just going to take that. When an incel hurts me, I'm going to hurt them. And we can kind of see this level of like glee and schadenfreude, right? Like look at this. Like here's a dude who's like empathic towards a group of people that he believes are suffering, and like 40,000 upvotes, lots of awards, right? Helpful. Yeah, let's like pile on with the schadenfreude, right? And why do we do that? It's because these people have hurt us, right? These people have come in and said things, and in some cases hurt us, meaning like they've taken a gun to a school and killed innocent children. So screw them, right? Like there's a damn good reason that we don't want anything to do with them. So there is legitimate hurt caused by the incel community and incels. You cannot, that's, in my opinion, indisputable. You just have to look at the one mass shooting makes that statement true. Now, are all incels that bad? No, right? So there's caveats here. But the other thing to consider, this is where things get tricky, is why do we reject incels? Because they hurt us. So another really important principle that I've come to really appreciate is that usually hurt people, right? When I've been hurt, what do I want to do? I want to hit back. And so then the question kind of becomes, when an incel shows up and says something hurtful, why are they saying something hurtful in the first place? Well, that is because they've been hurt, right? For years and years and years and years, they've been hurt. They've been neglected by their parents, bullied by their peers, rejected, sometimes implicitly, sometimes through neutral stimuli, sometimes explicitly, because some incel like who doesn't know how to talk to anyone like goes up and asks someone out on a date, and the person is like, no. And then the person feels really, really rejected, doesn't really know how to get over it, doesn't have the emotional awareness to regulate themselves, et cetera, goes to the incel crowd riles them up, and they feel really hurt. They feel resentful. But they've been hurt too. That's why they're acting this way, sort of, right? It doesn't completely excuse their actions, but I do think that's important to acknowledge. The third thing that's really important to think about, so here's like what I think is the real problem with the incel thinking. So do I believe that human beings are entitled to sexual satisfaction or romantic relationships? No. But I do think that like a basic part of being human is to engage in romantic relationships and engage in sex. Like I think that's like one of the main things that most human beings should be able to do in their life, right? So I kind of agree that that's like a normal part of life. It's not for everyone, right? So we have people who are celibate, voluntarily celibate. We have people who are monks. I almost became one. I decided that celibacy wasn't for me, right? So all those kinds of things, like there are legitimate wants that they want. They don't want to be lonely. They want to feel connected. They want to build a life with someone. They want to get laid. I think those are reasonable things to want from life. Are you entitled to them? No. The truly devastating thing about the incel mindset is when you attribute your loneliness or sexual isolation to pseudoscientific biological determinism and society. What you do is surrender all control to fix the problem. And this has been my overwhelming experience working with incels, is that they can actually no longer become an incel, and it's way, almost in a sense, easier than they thought, because they thought it was impossible. But it turns out that once you develop confidence in yourself, once you start to, start socializing with people, once you start kind of getting out there a little bit, that most of that rejection actually comes from here. Most of it comes from the predetermined belief that there's no way you can get anyone to date you. And as you start to build that confidence, you can actually like have all of the things that you want. And this is what I think is so damaging about the incel kind of belief system, is that it attributes everything that they're missing in life to factors completely outside of their control. And this is what pisses society off. Because when I say, oh, I can't get laid, and it's because of the sexual marketplace, and women are all this and that, and then society looks at it and it's like, let's start with hygiene, let's start with exercise, let's start with getting dressed, let's start with like not spouting that crap when you first are talking to a girl. How about that? Because what society sees is that there's actually a lot that you can do, but the incels don't see it that way. Which is why the belief system is so damaging. Not only is it toxic to other people, what I really dislike about it is that it's toxic to yourself. Right? What it really screws is you, if you believe this stuff. Because the truth of the matter is that most people who get laid are average. That's how it is. Okay? The last thing that I want to comment a little bit on is some of these like manosphere spaces that will speak to this kind of thing, right? So you'll have like this talk of alphas and betas, and you'll have some of these like spaces where people kind of buy this kind of stuff, but there's a slight spin on it, which I think there's an aspect to this. Part of the reason that I think we see these spaces growing is because there's an aspect of this that's advantageous. I wouldn't quite call it healthy, but there's some health here. So there's a group of people who accept the pseudoscientific biological determinism, but they make one big difference, is they say that you can actually do something, right? So like start working out, start dressing well, start doing this, and then you will become a Chad, and then you will get laid. And the interesting thing is that that's somewhat successful, right? Because like, remember, the key thing here is that this isn't biologically deterministic, that there's a lot that even if you're an incel, you can do to start improving your chances for a romantic or sexual relationship. And so when people kind of advocate for this, they kind of say like there's the betas and the alphas. Come and join us in Alphaville and leave Betaville. And the key thing there is that they offer a path forward that involves individual responsibility. So that I think is healthy. What's unhealthy about it is that individual responsibility is couched in a context that I believe is fundamentally like dehumanizing, because it still presumes all of the pseudoscientific biological BS, right? Because no one who's in those spaces, like I've never really heard people. I don't spend a whole lot of time there, so maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe this is unfair criticism. I'm not hearing them like, yeah, today we're going to talk about how to get laid. And by the way, here's our bibliography at the end of, if anyone's interested, here's our bibliography of 14 randomized controlled trials that verify what I'm about to say. Never seen that. So I think that even though like what we're sort of seeing is that incels gravitate towards this group of people because they encourage some degree of individual responsibility and stop blaming the world for your problems and like take responsibility for yourself, which I think is like a good thing to do, right? It's good to like stop blaming the world for my problems and take some degree of responsibility for myself. The challenge is that what they do though is still couched in the toxic attitude or perception of the world of like, there's the alphas and betas. That's just not correct scientifically. And so just to kind of summarize, like, I think that we're seeing way more incels. Some of them are tragically violent. And I do suspect, for example, that the violence has increased over the last 3 years. So remember when we said there's 52 known deaths caused by incels between 2009 and 2019, that was 2019. The world is a very different place from 2019. So we're seeing more people identify as incels. Why is that happening? I think it's a combination of risk factors that have existed since the dawn of time, plus some new factors from the internet. So we know that people who identify as incels often grow up in situations where they were bullied, persecuted, or neglected by peers and parents. And that this leads to some amount of developmental change in terms of personality. Low extroversion, high neuroticism, high rejection sensitivity. Based on these kinds of things, it leads to a social skills atrophy. That social skills atrophy is accelerated by online connection. Because now that I can do everything on the internet, I don't ever need to learn social skills. I'm not forced to learn social skills the way that I would have been 100 years ago, even if I had all of those risk factors. As your social skills atrophy, and as you move towards the internet, you miss developmental milestones. And then once you start to enter this community and you go through the online radicalization process, the online drift process, then you start to believe particular things. Like if I've missed a milestone, I'm screwed forever. That there are the haves and the have-nots. And then this kind of stuff is like all of the beliefs that I've formed, which are actually born of like emotional resentment. That's really where the belief comes from, right? Like I believe that I'm undateable. I believe that I'm unlovable. And that starts like really young when I'm 7 years old and I didn't get invited to the birthday party. And that seed gets planted, and then all this pseudoscientific stuff, kind of the reason I call it pseudoscientific is because I think a certain amount of it is scientific, but when it's filtered through that cognitive bias, it becomes pseudoscientific. And now it becomes truth. And now it becomes us versus them. And now it becomes the world is denying me my entitlement. And once the world starts denying me my entitlement, a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of these people will resort to the only thing that they have left, which is violence. What needs to be done about it? I personally agree with I don't know if it's majority, but a lot of researchers will call for rehabilitation of incels, right? Like, I don't think that these people are unsavable. I do believe that they deserve, to a certain degree, happiness in life, right? I think that they should have romantic relationships. They should have sexual relationships. But it is not the responsibility of women to give them that, right? Like, the responsibility lies to a certain degree with the incel. And like recognizing, and this is what I think kind of that manosphere space offers them, is they say, hey, you can become something that you can be proud of. The problem is that all of those beliefs are born out of that same kind of biological determinism, sexual marketplace kind of like thinking. And because of the way of the internet glorifying extremes, right? And the internet glorifying like emotionally engaging content, the most extreme and emotionally engaging people from that sphere rise to the top, because that's what we select for on the internet. And then we wind up with where we are, which is that incels show up somewhere and they get banned for saying something that's hurtful to other people. Do I believe they're responsible for hurting people? Absolutely. And also, this ain't gonna work, right? Like, I don't know how to say this. Like, you can't ban, like, we're banning incels right, left, and center, but their number is growing. The more we marginalize them, the more we ban them, like, the more resentful they're becoming. Things are getting worse, not better. And am I advocating that incels should be able to show up anywhere and say whatever they want to? Absolutely not. Because let's acknowledge that a lot of what they say is hurtful to other people. So I think it starts with understanding like who this person is. It starts with some degree of compassion, whatever we can muster. It also involves a healthy amount of accountability, both on the incel's part and on the person who is rejecting the incel's part. Now, does accountability mean you have to be forced to date them? No, not at all. That's not what I'm saying at all. What it means is that if you're in a situation where someone is saying something to you that you find hurtful or triggering, if you can muster it up, have some compassion. That's all I'm asking for. Do you have to date them? No. Do you ever have to talk to them again? No. But I think that you can go as far, I would hope, right? That what you could do is say, hey, like, the way that you're talking, I find to be dehumanizing and encourages me to not want to ever speak to you again. Right? Like, I feel dehumanized by what you're doing, and I don't think I can interact with you as long as you keep on talking like this. Or even, it's not as long as, if you've decided that you don't never want to talk to them again, that's fair. But it'd be cool if we could give them some feedback, right? And by the way, like, I'm not rejecting you because of your jawline. I'm rejecting you because the words that you choose to say are hurtful and dehumanizing. Because I think this is the key thing. It's despicable, loners, weirdos. These are all non-actionable pieces of, like, if I tell someone, hey, like, yeah, I'm rejecting you because you're a despicable, weirdo loner. Like, what is that person, like, what do we expect that person to do? Like, what, like, really, like, what is that person supposed to do? How do they fix that? And when we use words like weirdo, then it's like, of course it's predetermined. Society has determined that I'm a weirdo. Do I just wake up one day and take oh, look, here's my anti-weirdo potion? Not a weirdo anymore. So I do think that they deserve compassion. I think all people deserve compassion. I do think that they are a toxic part of the internet. I do think that they're hurtful. And like, I don't know exactly how we're going to fix this problem, but I think it starts with like understanding. And as much as we can, compassion. And if you are an incel, I encourage you very, very strongly to critically think about your beliefs and engage with people who are like not part of your community. And ask questions of people who are normal or normies. Say like, hey, sometimes I believe, I kind of feel this way, like I've been rejected my whole life. Like, what do you think about that? Or how do you, like, just like engage with them. Don't just show up and spout all your incel nonsense, which you're allowed to believe, sort of, right? Like, but like you have to engage in dialogue, but dialogue requires two people. And so I hope we can continue to help these people. I hope we can rehabilitate these people. I hope we can help these people understand that everything that they want is actually achievable. And all it takes is like a particular kind of effort on their part. Because I think they try really, really hard. They just don't know, how to try. So like that's a big challenge. So my hope is that we can try to help these people. We can try to support these people. And at the same time, supporting these people and having compassion towards them does not in any way give them an excuse, license, or excuse accountability for the things that they do that are toxic to other people. And at the top of the list is commonly dehumanizing women, which I don't think is okay. Like that's part of the toxicity. And that's what's challenging. Questions? What did we do? Did we step in a gigantic pile of shit today? Kind of. Okay. I mean, it's like, are most incels actually this inflammatory, though? So that's a great question, Gammon Kills. Like, I think that most incels are not that inflammatory. I think my overwhelming experience with incels is that it's been like relatively silent, quiet suffering with very little dialogue or interaction. The challenge is that the ones that we will see or come across will be that inflammatory. So this is the thing. Are most of them that inflammatory? No. But which ones are you the most likely to encounter? The most inflammatory ones. Right? Because inflammation causes swelling and dissemination. And that's just what we select. Like that's what we bought when we built the internet. So God's ID Meyer, God Sid Meyer is saying, Dr. K is an ex-incel. You hit so many valid points that are quite true. I appreciate the feedback. But should you judge whole group based on the actions of some, BanGOB says? Well, so remember that what we put together today was not the actions of some. So if we were judging the whole group of incels based on the actions of some, we would come to a conclusion like all incels are violent and should be avoided at all costs. Right? That's not what we actually said today, because I don't believe that. I believe a small proportion of them are extremely violent and should be held accountable for their actions. And that no amount of being bullied in childhood excuses physical violence, sexual violence, or anything like that. Like you don't get a pass on those kinds of things just because you got bullied in school. And at the same time, what we do know, what I tried to present today, it's a good question. What I tried to present today is what we know about them as a group. So that's why we cited so much research, right? Like we're not looking, that's what I think a problem with the research is 30% of the research articles focus on like less than 5 incels. Because they do like handwriting analysis and manifesto analysis and things like that on the minority. Whereas if you look at the majority, this is what you see, is that they have high neuroticism, low extroversion, high rejection sensitivity. That's like on the population as a whole. So I tried to not generalize, except for the things which are based on generalizations, if that kind of makes sense. So when we survey like 1,000 incels and these are the conclusions that we come to that are statistically significant, those are the generalizations that I make. Why do you think that people don't understand that these issues do not exist in a vacuum? Because the human brain was not, the human brain was designed to simplify things. Right? So the human brain is designed to be tribal, us versus them. The human brain is designed to like attribute complex phenomenon to simple reasons. We have to fight against our nature. Why does lightning happen? Because of Zeus. Right? It's not like all kinds of electrostatic forces, the earth is grounded, pressure currents, clouds, different kinds of clouds, cumulonimbus, like that's not how we're designed to. Science is not really in line with like what human brains are made for. Right? So the practice of science is actually trying to reduce the world to something that a human brain can understand through particular kinds of instruments. Do you think social media and pornography is worse than this? I want to say absolutely, probably for both. Social media, almost certainly, because I think part of the reason we're seeing the growth in incels is because of it correlates with the growth of social media. Yeah, so your boy Big Pat is saying if an incel gets banned from a community that they thought would help from a comment they genuinely didn't know was bad to say, what should they do? Because they may not learn that that's bad to say in general. They may just learn that it's bad to say in that community or setting. That's a huge problem. So I don't know where incels go to get educated. That's part of the problem, right? Is that people who ban, it is not the job of a moderator to educate people who are banned. And you will say, well, it should be. Well, if you say it should be, all that proves to me is you have no idea what it's like to be a moderator. Because educating people who get banned is a waste of everyone's time, on average. Because most people who get banned don't care what the moderator thinks. All they are is upset because they got banned. So I don't have an answer to that one. I'd love if people have solutions. Like, that's great. So we try to, I think our mods do a fantastic job, right? So we try to have certain ground rules about like, don't dehumanize a class of people. Mods aren't perfect, by the way, right? They don't have time to read every single comment. And if you're someone who's getting bent out of shape because the mods missed one kind of dehumanizing comment and they let this other one, they banned one and they missed another one. Like, that's also like, that could be your cognitive bias. They're human. They may be missing all kinds of dehumanizing comments that you don't have an issue with, right? They're human. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to miss things. Yeah, so I don't know. Unbanned requests are full of people needing to be taught why their behavior wasn't kosher. I completely agree. So I think the challenge is that much like school teachers, you can't just put everything on the moderators. Like, yeah, like they need to learn stuff, but like, I don't know who's going to do. That's why we do what we do, right? So my hope is that if you're watching this and you've been banned from some corner of the internet for saying things that are misogynistic or incel oriented or whatever, you like consider what we said today. And you start to think a little bit about like, do you have compassion towards the people that you speak to? Because it's not just that people don't give incels compassion. It's that incels almost never are compassionate towards other people, except each other. An incel being compassionate towards a woman, good God. What we will sometimes see is them being nice and then expecting something in return. They'll be like transactionally nice. That's very common and leads to a lot of frustration, right? But I don't see a whole lot of compassion. Maybe it exists, and I just don't see it. I'll be the first to kind of admit that. Grabix is asking, how do you know that most banned people don't care what moderators say? Because I've talked to moderators. So I'm assuming that the moderators are correct there. So I think this is good. So Cade Spade is saying, as a femme, a woman, I don't know if I'm misgendering you in any way. Apologies. Every time I've tried to engage with incel types, they're instantly super and insulting and aggro. And anything I say like, well, you're a female, of course you'd say that. And they don't believe what I'm saying. How do I engage with compassion where they just want to confirm what they already believe? That's the challenge. That's what I'm saying. It's hard, right? Because there you are trying to engage someone with conversation and they just like spout stuff at you. and I encourage you for trying. I think that's what the world needs more of. But like, so let me give y'all just one or two examples. It may not work. Okay. So like, I'm not saying this is going to work because it's hard. I don't have all the answers. We're just getting started here. But what I'd say is that, hey, I've noticed that I'll share some opinions with you. What's your understanding of how you respond to my opinions? Like, and then ask them, like, how are you responding to my opinions? I don't feel like we're having a conversation. I feel like you're not really hearing what I'm saying. Anytime I try to say something to you, what I'm getting from you seems like a scripted response that does not acknowledge my view at all. And then they may be super confused by that, but then you can I think it's like, you can still reject them, just reject them and give them reasons. Say like, so this is a conversation that I don't feel like participating in anymore because of the way that you're approaching me and the words that you choose to use. I imagine you perceive this as a rejection, but what I'm kind of telling you is that like, I'm not being heard. I feel like I'm talking to a YouTube video where it's like scripted. And that's not something I'm interested in doing for much longer. I'm trying to give you feedback. If you don't want to change it or you disagree with it, that's totally fine. If you want to keep doing what you're doing, that's totally fine. Just please understand that the reason I'm stepping out of this conversation is because of your behavior. And this is the problem with the incel level of thinking, is that behavior is not responsible for any of it. So that's what needs to change. It's jawline, it's sexual marketplace, it's women are all this, it's they mate selection this, oxytocin that, biceps this, money this. Behavior is not responsible. Individuality and behavior is not responsible for any of it. That's what needs to change. How common are incels among LGBTQIA? Did you get a chance to speak to any? So I don't know epidemiologically how common incels are. What I have seen, I've spoken to some let me think about this. I don't know if I've definitely spoken to some incels who are men and homosexual, and they are in a terrible place of self-esteem. Because for them, like, getting laid is supposed to be easy as a gay man, right? Like, one of the most judgmental things that I've heard gay men say to themselves, and hopefully this isn't offensive, I speak out of compassion, is that like there's this idea, which I think is false, that once again, all gay men are like down to have sex all the time. Right? This is like, it's a stereotype. It's a judgment. And so if that's the way the world is, and I still am unable to engage in a romantic or sexual relationship, that means I'm twice as broken. So I've seen a lot of shame associated with that. And please, y'all, I'm relying on y'all to correct me if I'm saying something that's out of turn. You know, hopefully that wasn't offensive to anyone, but if it was, like, please correct me. I think it's actually really sad, the stereotypes that gay men have to live up to. Like, it's really hard. Right? It's tough. Can you get a bit into female incels? Not as much, unfortunately. So this is where I have to acknowledge, so the couple of things. One is that, like I said, up to 24% of incels are actually women. The most recent statistic that we could find suggested up to 24%. The original incel was a woman. And I think that I've had far less experience with female incels. But what I will say is it's similar in the sense that there's this presumption that men are down to have sex anytime. And so what that does is actually further damages self-esteem, because if you can't get laid and men are down DTF all the time, then like, how broken must you be? Right? Oh yeah, it's shocking. People have no idea. The first incel was a woman. That's been, I mean, the sources that we found were pretty good. There's like a paper that's 20 years old. And actually 30, like close to 30 years old now, that talks about the first paper that we could find. The first peer-reviewed literature article on incels, involuntary celibates. Okay. So Lion PS4 is saying, I guess what has worked for me in a professional environment, engineering male to male, is to let them get that frustration out and show you're receptive to what they are saying. But if asked your view or wish to provide it, respectfully disagree in a light touch. They're looking for the bold cutoff as reinforcement. Beautifully said. That's kind of what I was saying. But patience, letting them get it out and then changing the subject lightly seems to work well. That's what I've sort of seen, is that they're looking for the rejection, right? It's almost like religious people who are proselytizing and they show up and inconvenience you. And when you slam the door in their face because they show up at your doorstep and are proselytizing, that hardens their faith. They're right, like, oh my God, like the unbelievers, they need to be saved. You get what I'm saying? They almost debate the rejection, and then the rejection hardens their view. Okay. Free. Okay, let's move on. Why do they want to be validated? They should want to be proven wrong. On the contrary, we all want to be validated, right? We all want to be validated. So I've mentioned this a couple times before. I learned something very interesting when I was training to become a psychiatrist. When a patient walks into your office and says, I'm suicidal, the instinct is to say, oh, you have so much to live for. Like, you should live so much. But what I've really found is like therapeutic, and we've got like studies to back this kind of stuff, is not saying you have so much to live for. It's help me understand why you're suicidal. And then they tell you the 1,000 things that are falling apart in their life. And then the right is, you can, I mean, there's not really a right answer there, but I think a good research-based answer is to say, wow, I can totally understand why someone in your situation is feeling like ending their life, because it seems like every dimension of your life is falling apart. I can totally see how you're in a very dark place right now. And I disagree. I don't think that's the right thing for you. Because here's what I've seen as a psychiatrist. I've seen 1,000 other, maybe not 1,000, 100 other people come into this emergency room just like you did, ready to end their life. And I'd say 95 of them a week later are glad they didn't. So I've seen people get out of this situation and move in a positive direction. That's why I think it's a mistake. But I totally understand that you haven't seen 100 people who are suicidal get back on their feet. So I can totally understand that you would think that what I'm saying is insane. Right? That's validation. Totally get it. You want to say, I don't know what I'm talking about. You want to call me judgmental? Go for it. Tokikata saying, question, we have sex ed in school, but how come we never have training in courtship? There's training about what not to do, like sexual assault, rape, but no practical training on healthy ways of courtship, on how to navigate that dynamic. Why? It's a great question. So I think this is something that we need, and we're recognizing that we need. So prior to the internet, humans naturally learned how to be human. We learned about courtship and dating and socializing. There's a lot of stuff that we've taken for granted because it was automatically done for like 100,000 years since we've been living in tribal societies. Now we're so disconnected, and there are things that we have to explicitly learn that we've never had to before. So if you think about why don't our parents teach us how to date, it's because no one needed to teach them how to date. Their parents didn't need to teach them. Their parents' parents didn't need to teach them. Their parents' parents didn't need to teach them. We all just kind of figured it out because it was a part of what tribal, close-knit communities were like. And so now, like, we're not like that anymore. So what we're seeing is that there's like a need for explicit education on things that we've never needed before. And so we just sort of naturally, from generation to generation, just assume that what worked in the past is working now. Go to college, get a job, buy a house, get married, have 2 kids. You'll be fine. One of the parents can stay at home. Doesn't work anymore. The rules of life are changing. And we need to change with them, and we haven't changed fast enough. So it's kind of interesting, Tokikata, but we're actually going to we spoke at one education conference. We're going to be speaking at one more educational conference in 2022, specifically advocating for this kind of stuff. Zalia Nix is saying, I think I have some female incel tendencies as I consider myself too broken and incapable to socialize to build meaningful relationships, and kind of gave up trying at some point since it often ended in getting abused. However, I can't wrap my head around alpha beta stuff, just people lucky enough not to experience things that would make them the way that I am. My heart goes out to you for everything that you've been through. And I think that, first, thank you for sharing your comment. I think... So, this may not apply to you, okay? But I'm going to share something that I've noticed about people and how they find relationships. So part of the reason that I think online relationships are so hard is because when we're selecting someone to consider dating, there are people that are out of our league and there are people that are in our league. And we approach the people in our league. The problem is that depending on our self-esteem, what's out of our league or in our league like changes a lot, right? So if I feel really poorly about myself, the only people that I'm going to feel comfortable dating, bizarrely, are people that are in my league and or are just as busted as I am. So we'll see this a lot in addiction, where like, I'm an addict. It's easy to date an addict. They understand. But now you've got 2 people who are addicted in a relationship. And one of them tries to get sober. And the other one uses. It's real hard to get sober when your romantic partner is using. And so then they keep using. I relapse. We're back to square one. They try to get sober. I'm using. They relapse because I'm using all the time. Back to square one. It becomes harder. So it's tough. Rock and Roll is saying, Dr. K, what about not wanting to date someone average? What can I do about it? Do you think it's an unrealistic expectation? So, great question. And we really got to move on after this, okay? So if you want to date someone average, is it an unrealistic expectation? So we have a problem right now in the dating world, in that we think we know what makes a good relationship, when chances are we don't. So along came the dating apps, and the dating apps allowed us to select people based on particular criteria. But the criteria that dating apps allow us to select people on don't actually correlate with like what makes a successful relationship. Because people sort of say, I don't want to settle, right? They're like, I deserve what I want, which is totally fine. The question is what you want actually good for you? And for people like, well, obviously, because it's what I want. Well, I want to eat pie every day and sleep till noon. Is that good for me? Is that healthy? So everyone is picking people based on what they want, which sort of makes sense, right? Like, kind of makes sense. Like, why on earth would you date someone that you don't want? But what I've found, honestly, almost every single really successful relationship I've seen, and like now, I'm coming up on 40. So like I've known people that have been together for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And also as a psychiatrist, I see the inside of a lot of good relationships. What I find is that if you had asked that person, like, what do you want? The person they ended up with would not have fit their criteria. I'm at the top of the list. Hell, my wife is at the top of the list there. I swore I'd never date an Indian girl, let alone get married to one. And she said the same damn thing. She's like, never date an Indian guy, never get married to an Indian guy. And here we are. The one that's really the only thing that I cared about. It's like, I just don't want to end up with an Indian girl. Like, F that. And so, like, I think it's kind of bizarre, but I think when we think about what we want, we sort of don't give people a chance. So then we start selecting people based on, like, what we think we like. But then we never get a chance to learn, oh, wow, this is something in a relationship that I value so much that I did not even know existed. Because if you think about what truly makes someone amazing and unique, you're not going to know that until you get to that person. Does that make sense? So I think this whole business of settling is like, you're approaching it wrong. It's sort of like, okay, I really want to go see the Eiffel Tower, but I guess I'll settle for Japan. Because I really like French stuff. And I really like baguettes and croissants. And omelets. And I love French cuisine. Best croissant I've ever had is in Japan. Right? So what you're really doing is depriving yourself of an opportunity to learn about another human being. And they may look average, or they may be average in some other dimension, but they may be exceptional in some other way that, like, you just can't see on Tinder. Like, maybe they just make amazing cups of tea. Or maybe, the way that they treat you when you're feeling bad is, like, exactly what you need. Which is not to be overly attached, but also, like, give you your space, but be supportive. And the problem is that, like, that's what makes a good relationship. It's like all this stuff that you don't even realize that you're looking for. And so we'd put words to it, like emotionally available, or confident, or good with my parents. So I think you're allowed to be attracted to whatever you want to. You should pick whatever you want. But I'd also encourage you to really ask yourself, how much do you know about what's going to make you happy? And to maybe, as wild as it sounds, give someone an opportunity to make you happy. Because when someone really loves you, when you're the number one person in the entire world for them, they will discover ways to make you happy that you had no conception of. Like things that you would never dream of doing for yourself. Like, you didn't even know this was possible. But because they pay attention to you, they know what you like, they learn your mannerisms because they love you. And they're like, you know what this person would like? This is what this person would like. And you had no idea. For me, just to give you an example, it was a scarf. I was like, I can't wear a scarf. Like, I'm from Texas. People from Texas don't wear scarves. Scarves are like, I don't know. Doesn't feel very Texan. Doesn't feel very manly. And then my wife got me a scarf and she's like, you should really wear this. And then I wore it the way that my family used to wear scarves, which were Indian, so we didn't know how to wear scarves. So they didn't do anything. And then she introduced me to scarves. I was like, wow, this is revolutionary. I feel so much warmer. So I'd say give people a chance. So behind on chat. Scarf merch. It's not like I don't think you'll understand. It's like, I've been drinking out of streams my whole life, and someone came along, and it's like, I have no idea there's such a thing as a cup. And someone is like, here, try using this thing. And I was like, wow. It doesn't have to be a fancy scarf. It doesn't have to be a special scarf. It doesn't have to be an HG scarf. It's just I learned something that another human being has discovered some joy in the world, and they shared that with me. And I discovered particular joys that I shared with her, like Naruto, which she binge-watched 300 episodes in 72 hours. She was an absolute zombie at the end of the weekend. I was funneling in pizza and water and other kinds of food She'd never watched anime before. She was like, what is this nerd stuff? Like, who are you? And I was like, you got to watch the first episode. The episode is epic. And she was kind of like, I built it up too much, but then she kept going. And then it was like, too much. So that's what it's like. It's like, you think you know what you want in life, and which is fine, right? It's not that you don't know, but there's like so much. The whole point of at least for me, and not the whole point, a huge part of like a nice romantic relationship is that they show you the world in a way that you've never seen before, because their experience is different from your experience. Dude, honestly, I'm trying to get her into Three Kingdoms Total War, because we watched some like Chinese version of three. I mean, obviously it's gonna be Chinese, but some show of Three Kingdoms like many years back, and it was epic. It's really fantastic. But I think she's not willing to commit getting sucked into it. Yeah, we watched Attack on Titan together, and I think she's seen Death Note. I tried to force her into watching it. Okay. What is M2TW? Total War? And what is M2? Dude, I love Total Warhammer. Y'all kidding? I love that. My biggest complaint growing up, so like when I was growing up, I remember going into like the gaming store and seeing people play Warhammer, but like it's just such an investment. You know, like I had to buy so much stuff, and like I tried to buy a couple miniatures, and I suck at painting, so they looked like trash. And so like I just couldn't, like I literally like could not invest to get into it. And then Total War came along. It's like a computer game. It's like, hell yeah, dude. Like, love playing dwarfs, love playing Skaven. Tomb Kings, elves, But I'm totally down with Grombrindle. Absolutely, dude. I tried playing Greenskins. You know, I thought I would love it, but didn't do it for me. I need to. And so I liked. Let me see. So I think dwarves and Skaven are probably my two favorite factions. Tomb Kings and High Elves. High Elves are pretty simple. I thought I'd like Dark Elves. I just really don't like the way they play. Don't like Wood Elves. Not a huge fan of Greenskins. I haven't really tried Empire or Bretonia. I'll give Ogres a shot. Haven't tried Chaos or Beastmen or the Pirate Vampires. I like Vampires. Vampire Counts is okay. But it's really about dwarves and Skaven for me. I haven't gotten time to like, because here's the thing, you gotta like, it takes 50 hours just to learn the race. Wasn't a big fan of Lizardmen either. Okay, let's move on. Topic change. Wait, so is there a Total War Warhammer 40K? So Cray 101 is saying, what do you do if you're forever alone at 31, even though you improved yourself inside and out and tried to meet people, but no one is ever interested? Guy, obviously. We're going to talk about that in a second. I got to turn down the air conditioner because suddenly it got hot in here. All right, let's keep going. What am I looking at? Chillin'. You know, one of the things that I really appreciate about y'all chat in general, one of the things that I'm very grateful for, is that I get to work, and is a legitimate part of my job. I get to talk about Warhammer for like 15 minutes and no one gets upset. Like, how sweet is that? And related to that, thank you for making it possible. Oh no. Missing my notebook. It's okay. We're going to have to wing it. It's all right. No, hold on a second. Hold on. Let me go find it. Here it is. Found. Saved, chat, saved. Pretty sweet. So thank you very much for making this an opportunity. No, it's really great. I appreciate it. Okay. Why walk around your chair? All right, so I wanted to share a couple things with y'all. Okay. Let's take a look. Number one, it's my birthday today. Well, happy birthday, GumFun20. Hey, it's my birthday today. I think it's going to be a happy one, but I'm not 100% sure. Hope you guys have an amazing day. Hope you, well, this was 20 hours ago, so I hope you had, oh, look, it just moved to 1 day ago. Happy birthday. Happy birthday, Anon. Oh, wow, there's a Pepe with a birthday hat? Feels birthday, man. Okay. Next up. Today is my 35th day without a cigarette, and I just wanted to say thank you to the Healthy Gamer community and Dr. K. I've tried to quit smoking dozens of times, and honestly, I thought I'd tried everything. Gum, patches, food, incremental change, stopping cold turkey, and none of it worked. I'd honestly lost hope and resigned myself to a life as a smoker. People always told me that failure was supposed to make you stronger, but it never felt that way for me. Every time I thought about it, trying again, it felt like all of my previous failures were looking over my shoulder. It was like I could almost hear them laughing at me, like I was trying to fool myself into believing the sky was purple. I was on my way back from vacation, and in total, the trip lasts about 23 hours. Suffice to say, I had some time to kill, so I sat down to binge some of Dr. K's videos on perfectionism, failure, and other topics. When I arrived, the first thing I did was buy a pack of cigarettes. Dr. K, inspiring people. The next day, though, I was about to go outside to smoke, and I don't know what happened. I looked at the pack and I just decided I was done. This couldn't be my life. If I was going to focus on one thing to fix, as Dr. K said, it was going to be smoking. I can win every day I don't have a cigarette. So I did, and man, does it fucking suck. There were times I was standing there literally unable to move in any direction, having an internal war with myself because I wanted a cigarette so badly. I held one in my hand for a solid 5 minutes in the middle of a bar once, just staring at it. But here I am. I know it's an ongoing battle. I know I can't declare definitive victory, but this is the longest I've gone without a cigarette in 5 years, and every day I can extend that victory is enough for me. I just wanted to say thank you to this community and Dr. K from the bottom of my heart for helping me get this far. I really don't know where I would be without you guys in so many different ways I'm not even going to mention in this post. Thank you so fucking much. So I would say thank you in return. You're welcome first, and thank you as well for sharing your story. So the single most impactful thing that a doctor can do for their patient is help them quit smoking. If you look at morbidity, mortality, the single intervention, it's not starting a statin, it's not starting a diabetes medication, it's quitting smoking. It's incredibly hard to do. And I really love how this person shared this segment as well, because anytime... So here's like the challenge. Like we all say like, oh, like failure makes you stronger, right? Like, oh, like failure, like what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Man, that's not what it feels like. Let's be honest. It doesn't feel like it makes you stronger. Because here's the thing. If you try something and you fail once, you try something again, you fail again. You try something a third time, you fail. So what happens is the failures pile up, right? And then at some point, your mind concludes that you can't do this. Because each failure is like, predicts your next failure. It doesn't actually make it easier for you, it makes it harder. Because now you failed 9 times. And so then that part of your brain that calculates cause and effect is like, we can't do this. We've tried 9 times. And so each of those failures is looking over your shoulder. And each time you try, you're like, oh my God, I've failed so many times. I'm doomed to failure, because that's how our brain works. It's like, hey, if there are clouds in the sky and it rains, okay, I got rained on once, rained on twice, rained on 3 times, rained on 4 times, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And now when I see clouds in the sky, I'm going to get wet. Cause and effect. That's the tricky thing, is that we have to fail in order to succeed. In actuality, each failure does bring us closer to success, because now we have more experience. We understand better what we're dealing with. The challenge is that each failure comes with a psychological cost, opens up a debt, and warns you against trying again. So props to you for quitting for the longest time that you have in 5 years. Keep it up, and thank you for sharing. Okay, let's keep going. Good stuff. Thank you all very much for sharing. Okay. So I saw there was a good question, and there's a post very similar to it. Give me a second. I need water. Okay. All right. Changing how I present myself has changed my life. Hello, everyone. I'm writing this on mobile, so there may be some errors in grammar and flow in my writing. Just as the title says, changing how I present myself has completely changed my life. For some background, I do go to the gym regularly for 2 years and have quite a large figure. I'm 280 pounds, 300 pounds 3 months ago. I'm 6'1", and people have always been shocked at my weight since I'm lucky enough to have decent fat distribution around my body. My overall mass and presence became larger, but I still didn't feel any difference in my life from when I started lifting weights like I imagined. I was ignored or didn't exist to most people. Despite the great change in my figure, more had to be done, so I started small. A teeth whitening kit made me confident in my smile. Regularly applying lotion to my face makes my skin feel good. Finding a good necklace and bracelet, and lastly, getting a decent haircut and beard trim. I always believed I was introverted. However, I've noticed the past few months that I am completely wrong. I was just an underdeveloped extrovert. I had opened the door with so many people who previously wouldn't have even looked at me. I was never able to develop because I never had the presentation to do so. The simple acts in changing my appearance has given me an extremely high level of confidence to where I find people are actually nervous talking to me on occasion. It's completely shocking to me. But due to never having confidence, I could never become a good human. I'm happy to say the past few months on my ability to be social has increased tenfold. People want to talk to me more than I ever imagined they would. I actually feel like women are interested in me, or at least are willing to give me their attention to some extent. I feel like I can finally be human, all from a snowballing effect of improving my appearance. To sum up what I'm trying to say, go the extra mile in making yourself confident and having a good presentation. I get that you shouldn't judge another person based on their appearance, but most people will to some extent. Do it for yourself and people will notice, and you will have an easier time meeting and socializing with people. I love this post. Why do I love this post? Because this person talks about developing confidence. This is someone who says, look, you can become confident if you just focus on your appearance. Or not just focus on your appearance. They say, hey, start with this one thing. Now, if you're listening to this and you're kind of thinking like, if you struggle with your confidence and you're listening to this, I imagine that your reaction is, wow, that's really great. This person focused on their appearance. But that's them. There's no way that I could do that. This person is 6'1", has a decent body fat distribution, and has been exercising regularly for 2 years. Surely, that is what is responsible for their female attention and the fact that some people are now intimidated talking to them. This person says, work on your appearance and it's helped my confidence, it's helped me open up. But I'm actually going to discount what they say because they are 6'1", 280 pounds and have been working out for 2 years. And I am not those things, therefore this solution will not work for me. Right? Because that's why this person is confident. That's why this person is successful. They've been working out for 2 years. Like, I can't even go to the gym once a month. So today, we're going to talk about confidence. We're going to talk about where confidence comes from, how to develop it, and why what worked for this person can absolutely work for you. Because this person is saying, hey, I've been 6'1" and I've been working out for 18 months. Lost some weight. I've got it. All that stuff was true. Did they have confidence? Did they have social prospects? No. But you're like, but I'm not like that. Because this person was a diamond in the rough and now they've been polished. But I'm not diamond. I'm coal to begin with. You can't polish me to that. I can never achieve that. Even though the diamond is saying, polish yourself. But you're like, this person is different. This is how the mind works. So what we're going to dig into is a little bit about confidence, expectations, and how to build confidence and work on your confidence and set yourself up to be successful. So we got to start with this, okay? Yep. Hold on. When I say start with this, I mean, okay. So, this person, so let's talk about confidence and appearance. So this person says, I'm 6'1", 280 pounds, work out for 2 years, and work on appearance, and you will become confident. And if you're anything like I am or was, you're going to say, yeah, this is actually not the big part of it. Like, this is where the money is. But let's look at that, right? Let's be critical of it. So, let's start by understanding what influence does appearance and confidence in your appearance have on confidence. How does it affect social interactions? So let's say I'm at a social interaction and my hair is dirty and I got the BO and my fingernails are kind of scuffed and I don't dress very well. When I enter a social situation, what's going to be going on in my head? Oh my God, I look unkempt. Is my breath bad? Look at how everybody is so well dressed. That's not what you're going to say, right? You're actually not going to say well dressed. Actually, let's be clear. Look at how everyone is so attractive. And I'm not attractive. You're not going to recognize that dressing has something to do with attractive in the moment. You get what I'm saying? So if you're in a social situation with people, if your appearance is not optimized, your mind is going to populate your thoughts with like, oh my God, I'm so underdressed. Look at how good all these people look. So now I don't know if this makes sense, but this means that this is what you're thinking when you're in a social situation. And so what are you not thinking as a result? You're not attending to the situation. Right? Because when you're in a social situation, you're supposed to be focused on the other person. I'm engaged in an interaction. But literally, my mind is processing all of these kinds of thoughts. So like paying attention to the conversation, paying attention to body language. There's so much stuff, right? Making a joke, laughing at a joke. So here's what happens. I'm in a social situation. I'm in my own head about my appearance. Suddenly everyone starts laughing. I kind of like snap back to it. And I like, ha 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 ha. Right? And empathically in that moment, everyone else is kind of connecting with us, but there's this one guy, weird guy going, ha 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 ha. So here's the first thing to understand about appearance, like literally in a cognitive perspective. We want to cross this out because we're going to redirect that over here. We're going to cross this out, so we're going to redirect that over here. We're going to cross this out, so we're going to redirect that over here. And so being confident in your appearance literally allows you to free up cognitive energy to focus on social interactions and improve social interactions. Okay, so that's the first thing to understand. So I completely agree. You should get cleaned up. And not only will you be more confident in your appearance, but like literally in social interactions, it will allow you to perform better. Now, here's where I'd say I almost disagree with this person, tiny little bit, that their presentation leads to their confidence. And they even make statements like this, right, where they'll say, I was ignored or didn't exist to most people. So this is what this person's experience is, so that's fair. But what I would say is that when you're in your head, it is way easier to be ignored by other people. Right? Like, because you're not attending to them, and then you're just kind of like, you're the person who kind of didn't laugh at the joke. So it's like, okay, well, like, I don't know if this person likes me or not. So when I invite them, I'm not going to really, when I invite people over, like, I'm not going to invite them because they seem like they don't really like my kind of humor. Like, they don't seem to like me. So I'm not going to invite them. Okay, so that's something we got to really think about. So as this person starts socializing more, they say, I thought I was an introvert. I'm just an underdeveloped extrovert. And that's because what leads to underdeveloped extroverts? This, being stuck in your own head, not attending to the outside world. So presentation can absolutely improve your confidence. Not only from just like the way that you feel in your own skin, when you look at the mirror, in the mirror, okay? When you look in the mirror, what kind of thoughts pop out? When you like look in the mirror and you've like cleaned yourself up, even if you think you're an ugly mofo, if you clean yourself up, you're going to be better than average for yourself, right? Like, okay, this is like, I actually look pretty good today. And then that's going to boost your confidence. When it boosts your confidence, you're not going to have these kinds of thoughts. As you don't have these kinds of thoughts, as you enter a social interaction, you're going to perform better because you're attending to other people. Looking good. Another thing that I want to point out. So I don't think it's just appearance, though. This person started exercising. And people kind of say, oh, like once you start exercising, like people will like, oh, that's going to fix everything. Work on yourself, right? Working on yourself will fix everything. Because people like, you can't make anyone fall in love with you. Work on yourself. So here's what this person says. I exercised. Nada. Zip. Zilch. Okay. Then what happened? Okay, so then they started exercising. Then they started working on their appearance. Then they became presentable. As they became presentable, they started to get good reactions. People started being interested in them, maybe even intimidated by them. And then this leads to confidence. But here's what I'd argue. This is what this person says. This may be totally right. I'd say that this right here led to a tiny, tiny bit of confidence. And then this right here, like, I'm going to exercise because I'm going to like take care of myself. Like, this is good for me, right? Because when you first go to the gym, you're so out of shape and everyone else is there. And you're like, oh my God, these people are so in shape. But then you keep going, you get over that insecurity and you've leveled up your confidence a little bit. You don't even realize it. But now you have devoted 2 years to yourself in improving your life because you're worth it. And then something weird happens. You start to think, well, shit, maybe I'm worth it. Let me clean myself up. And then this leads to a little bit more confidence. Right? Because who's like, I don't know if this makes sense, but like, who deserves to look good? People who are good. When I feel terrible about myself, do I think I deserve to look good? Of course not. So I stay at home. I don't shower. I don't get nice clothing. Like, because I'm not worth it, right? Like people who like feel good about themselves are the ones who like deserve to go look good. But even in the effort that it takes, okay, like let's start working on this. I think your confidence boosts just a tiny little bit. And then you look in the mirror and then, wow. You feel like, you're like, wow, actually, like I'm doing pretty good. But what I want y'all to realize is this confidence from your presentation was built up here and here. Because even if you're someone who's, and maybe you're like this, or you know someone who's like this, who's objectively like pretty good looking, but when they look in the mirror, they have no confidence. All they can see is their flaws. So even if you're presentable, to be able to acknowledge that you're presentable and you're like not the ugliest troll on the planet requires this confidence that's built up a little bit at a time. And now what they think is that it's the presentable that leads to good reactions. And that's probably true, right? So people do get judged based on appearance, but I'd say that intimidating people isn't through appearance. Intimidating people and good reactions really come from confidence. So I didn't get much female attention growing up. Didn't get much female attention in college. Managed to get just enough. Then I got married. Or not married, but I started dating seriously. And then I was like, okay, I'm no longer looking. I got a girlfriend. No longer looking for a girlfriend. Done with that. Then something weird started happening. Since I wasn't worried about it, because what used to happen is like anytime like I went somewhere, right? Like in the back of my mind, I was like, oh my God, this girl's cute. Like, oh my God, I better not screw it up. I was in my head. What does she think of me? Like, I know she's got, but like, oh my God. I was just in my head. Then once I started dating someone, I was like, all right, I'm sat there, not looking for anyone. I became myself with other people. And that's what was so beautiful about my relationship is I met someone who like I could be myself with. So I didn't need to be anything else. Hell, I didn't even know we were dating for like the first month or two. I thought we were just hanging out, but apparently we were dating. That's how oblivious I was. And then once I started like, I'm like done with like, you know, I got a girlfriend now, it's easy. So like now when I started interacting with women, it was like, no pressure. I'm just going to be me because I'm not trying to get anything. I'm not trying to impress anyone. It's like, if this person rejects me, who the hell cares? I'm seeing my girlfriend later tonight. So I could just be me. And this is where like the most idiotic thing in my life, y'all have heard this story before, but I'll share it again. I was in class one day and there's a friend of mine sitting next to me and I'm bored. So I write a tic-tac-toe board on a piece of paper, okay? So this is what I do, chat. I write a tic-tac-toe board on a piece of paper. So what we're doing, Dr. K is like, I'm bored in class. Let me make a tic-tac-toe board. And then I pass it to my friend next to me. And what she does writes her phone number on it and passes it back. And my dumbass, I swear to God, this is not a lie. I'm not exaggerating one bit. My dumbass explains to her, nah, man, I'm trying to play tic-tac-toe. I don't want your number. And then I pass it back. And she straight up starts crying and leaves the room. There are not many things I regret in life, but this is one of my lowest points. It's one of the stupidest and most hurtful things I've ever done. So dumb. I mean, like, even now, like, So the thing is, like, the way that people treat you, it's all about how confident you are. And confidence is literally what's in your head. When you're with another person, I was still clueless and just such an idiot. And honest to God, if this person ever hears this story, because now sometimes people know who I am when I meet them, I'm so sorry. I'm not going to use the person's name, but if you were there, you know who you are. And so, like, you got to get out of your own head and just treat people as people. And, like, as you become confident each step of the way, as you exercise, it's not going to fix it, right? Like, people, like, work on yourself and it'll fix it. Like, fix it. And then you exercise and you're like, it's not fixed yet. Yeah, that's not how it works. You work on yourself, you build a little bit of confidence, build a little bit of confidence, build a little bit of confidence. And then it's not like you walk out onto the street and you're like, here I am, I have fixed myself. Let the humans come and love me. I'm transformed into a beautiful thing. Come, admire, worship. It's not how it works. Then you go and you interact with other human beings. And when you go interact with other human beings, you're not stuck in here. You can attend to the other person. And then once that starts happening, like, it's amazing because people will realize, hey, like, this person is pretty cool because you are your best self. Because you're not thinking about trying to impress them or trying to get into their pants or anything like. You're just like, hey, I'm a human being. You're a human being. Let's hang out. Let's have fun. We're like, at the library studying for a test together. Let's focus on the test. Let's joke a little bit. I'm not trying to get anything out of it. And when I do something nice for you, I'm not trying to get anything out of it. And so this person says, work on your appearance. I 100% agree. And I think this person is building more confidence at each step of the way than they give themselves credit for. But this is how it works. This is what it looks like. Where you do something and you're like, people told me to put my life together. I'm putting my life together. Nothing's happened yet. Nothing's happened yet. Nothing's happened yet. And then one day something clicks. And when something clicks, boy, does it click. And then you're like, oh my God, what on earth just happened? Because you're looking at this and you're like, what? Extremely high level of confidence to find where I find people are actually nervous to talking to me on occasion. Like, what on earth? Social skills have increased tenfold. People want to talk to me more than I ever imagined. Now, I can almost guarantee you that if you take this person 2 years ago before they started exercising and you dress them up the way that you did today and you sent them into a social situation, this would not happen. Maybe I'm wrong. But all of my experience tells me that, like, that's not how it works. This person has built up their confidence time and time and time again. And the trickiest thing about confidence is that you don't see it while it's being built. Right? It's like, I'm going to start exercising. And then the thoughts come and you overcome those thoughts. And then it's like, you know what? I'm going to get my hair cut. I'm going to take care of myself. And then the more that you do that, the more you're like, hey, I deserve to be taken care of. I'm going to take care of myself. Like, I don't even know if this person is there yet, but they deserve to feel confident. They deserve to be attractive. They deserve to feel good about themselves. And so if you want to build confidence, recognize that it's not going to be visible right away, but that you should really focus on yourself. And as you have those kinds of thoughts in social situations that come from a lack of confidence, think about what those specific thoughts are. Is it like, oh, my hair looks silly? Then go and fix that. That should be your, whatever thoughts you have in your head should be your roadmap of progress. I'm going to fix this. 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 And then go and put yourself in social situations. But if you expect, okay, I checked all these boxes, come and love me. Doesn't work like that. Start to flower, start to bloom. Put yourself out there a little bit. So here's the tricky thing about a flower. When it's a bud, it's protected. When it reveals its beauty is when it's the most vulnerable. And human beings are the exact same way. Right? The flower opens itself up and is fragile. But in order to show people what you have to offer, like that's what you've got to do. Show people what you have to offer. You will be amazed at how awesome you are if you can just get out of your own head. Questions? Okay. Dr. Cornelius is getting married before dating. That sometimes happens. I know I'm not joking there, but it's really interesting when we look at like things like arranged marriages. So like, sometimes you get married and then, when I say sometimes, it's not like this happens 15 times in your life, but there's some people who end up getting married and have to learn how to fall in love. Okay. What if no one reaches out to you or meets you halfway? So Dave Vigilante, that's where a couple of things. The first is I would be really careful about your perception of meeting you halfway. So depending on your own intrinsic rejection sensitivity, which you just got to be careful about. We're not saying that people don't meet you halfway. But the first thing you've got to do is like temper, like, okay, are they really not meeting me halfway? Or is there a beneficial way that I can view this that does not result in like, I'm not worth it, right? Am I really like, is this person actually meeting me halfway? But I need so much more than halfway. The other thing is that sometimes we need friend transplants. Like if we think about how we develop our friends, like they tend to be circumstantial. And sometimes it takes a lot of intentionality to like pick a community and actively try to join it. And that's a rough go. But sometimes people don't have the bandwidth to meet you halfway. Sometimes people don't have the interest. Sometimes people are absorbed in their own stuff. So it's easy to kind of get ignored. It does take two to make a friendship work. And I think what tends to happen, that's kind of sad, is that some people will, as they notice a friend slipping away, in order to preserve the friendship, they'll start devoting more than 50%. And then you do 60%. And then they do 40%. And then you do 70%. And then they do 30%. And then 80 and 20, 90 and 10. And then 99 and 1%. And then you're putting in all of this effort and they're not even reciprocating 1%. Because they've been pulling out of the relationship and you've been doing all the heavy lifting, so you've taken the responsibility off of them. And so they're like, okay. Now, why do we do that? Because we're afraid of the rejection, right? Because this person is our only friend or last friend, or we have so few friends, or like, I want this person to be my friend. But as you hold on to that and you do more than your fair share, just like any other thing in nature, if you start doing more dishes than is your fair share, people are happy to let you do more of the work. That's just how human beings work. So you got to be really careful about that. Because we want to try to make it work. Try to save it, right? Or you want to try to make a new friend. And since you want the friendship so, so bad, you invest 99% into it, and then it's not an equal relationship. So watch out for that. Okay, we've got time for one more that I want to get to, because I think this is a good one. Okay. Okay. So we're going to try to end with something kind of practical. My girlfriend is insecure and asks for proofs of love. I want to help her, but every time I just end up doing reassurance, it is not solving the issue. I want to change the terms of the conversation, but I need advice. I love my girlfriend. She is truly amazing, but she is insecure. Some things that most people won't think twice about can send her into an anxious spiral where she convinces herself I don't love her because she's not good enough. I always comfort her by explaining that the things discussed doesn't have anything to do with whether I love her or not. But by explaining, I end up having to prove that I love her. This is hurtful and emotionally exhausting. Also, it feels like no matter how much I reassure her, it's just a matter of time before something else sets her off. I want to help her overcome this, but I don't like the dynamic we have in these conversations. But I also feel like telling her, I love you, and if you doubt that it's on you is equally toxic. I just want her to be able to say, Alex loves me, there's probably some explanation. Like, not all the time, I just want to raise the threshold. I use my girlfriend as an example, but similar situations have happened with family members too. I know this is something she must overcome from within, but I want to help her, and I also want to reduce how much pain it gives me. So, sometimes we end up in a relationship with someone who needs a lot of emotional reassurance. They can almost become dependent on it. And so we're sort of left in this situation where they're like, they doubt our love, they doubt our commitment, they doubt, maybe they don't trust us, like it's whatever it is. And then what we have to do is like reassure them over and over and over again. Yeah, I do love you. No, like you're the only one. Like, no, like trust me. Like, I love you so much. I love you so much. And we recognize that our partner is hurting, right? We recognize that our partner is insecure. We want to help them feel loved. Like, why am I in this relationship if it's not to help my partner feel loved? Because I do love them. But it's kind of like emotionally exhausting. Because anything can kind of set it off. And then they need reassurance again. And as their romantic partner, it's like, it's my job to be responsible for the emotional health of my partner, right? Like, I'm the one who makes her feel loved. That's my job. And even if it's emotionally exhausting to me, I can't not do it because that's kind of toxic, right? I can't tell her, hey, I know that you're feeling unloved right now, but actually, like, that's on you. I've told you 1,000 times that I already love you. So if you don't get it now, like, and that feels wrong. Because what are they going to do if you say that? It's just going to ruin things. So what we're going to do for a minute is try to understand what's actually going on here. And then we're going to give you all some really, really practical tips on communication. These things are so revolutionary and so simple, but we never even think about them. It's so simple. Like, it's not any complex psychological stuff. It's like so easy, but we just never even think about it because we're never taught how to communicate. So the first thing to understand is that sometimes people that we're in relationships with, they can be romantic relationships or family relationships, can use us as a form of emotional coping. So when I'm feeling unloved and I'm feeling insecure, I can turn to someone else to reassure me. And the tricky thing is that when you reassure an insecurity, it doesn't actually dissolve the insecurity. What it does is it's almost like a coping strategy that's temporary. Right? Because what happens the next day, like the next time that happens, like you've told her you love her 1,000 times, tomorrow happens, something triggers the root insecurity, and now she needs to hear it from you. Because now what's going on, or, absolutely gender reversal works too, where like women need to emotionally reassure men, or men need to emotionally reassure men, or parents need to emotionally reassure kids, or whatever. You can become dependent on this person's reassurance. So as the emotional need arises, how does, in this situation, your girlfriend deal with her emotional needs? Who is responsible for her emotional needs? Of feeling unloved. Because chances are almost certainly that she started feeling unloved before she even met you. Right? Like, she's not confident and secure in herself before y'all started dating. So that's a need that predates you that she carries with her. And you can reassure it to make it go away temporarily. But what's actually happening over time is she's needing more and more reassurance, and you're feeling more and more trapped and exhausted. But not telling her, she's like, please tell me, just tell me that you love me. Tell me again. Tell me again. Tell me again. And if you're dating this person, you don't want to be like, no, I'm not going to tell you that I love you. You need to learn how to deal with it on your own. Because that sounds like an asshole thing to do. But reassuring doesn't actually fix the problem. Because the problem has its root somewhere else. So you can't fix it for her, right? So now the question is, what do you do about it? If this is the situation. If someone is using you to meet their own internal emotional needs, and this is different from the emotional needs that are necessary in a relationship, right? So if we're trying to understand the difference there are some emotional needs. Like if I'm single, there's no emotional needs of the relationship, right? When I start dating someone, there are certain things that I am sort of required to do to meet my partner's emotional needs. And there's certain things that they're required to do to meet my emotional needs. It's like saying stuff like, I love you before you get off the phone, or a kiss goodnight, or, all kinds of stuff. But those are needs that arise out of the relationship. The problem is sometimes in relationships, we use people to meet our own emotional needs. Another good example of this is loneliness. So sometimes people will enter relationships where, you're in this relationship and your partner wants to go out with their friends, and you're just texting them constantly. When are you going to be home? When are you going to be home? When are you going to be home? Because you're lonely. And so you use your partner as the sole antidote to your loneliness. But the more that they come home early, do you feel okay when they leave? On the contrary, you become dependent on them fulfilling your emotional needs, because now you found some way to make the loneliness go away. And then you drive them crazy. And as you drive them crazy because you are relying on your internal emotional needs to be met by a relationship, met by another human being, they go insane and then end up, there's friction in the relationship, y'all break up, and then you're back to lonely. And then the next time you enter the relationship, the whole cycle repeats, but now it's worse. So what do you do about this? So what you've got to do is teach your partner to tolerate some of that insecurity, right? So this is kind of tricky, but it's like they're associating your words of love with your love. And what they're almost doing is tangling those two together, where if you don't tell me I love you 1,000 times, that means you don't love me. That's how they're interpreting and entangling those two things. But that they don't get to determine that, right? So you get some amount of say in what actually demonstrates love. So the first tip that I'm going to give you is that people don't think about how to have these conversations. So most of what we're going to talk about today is actually how to have the conversation. So the first is that most of us try to have the conversation when our partner is emotionally needy, right? So let's take a quick look at this. So, but by explaining I end up having to prove to her that I love her, it's hurtful and exhausting, but I also feel like telling her I love you, and if you doubt that, that's on you, is equally toxic. But that I'm presuming that this is something that they can't say when their partner is emotionally needy. Does that make sense? So the first thing is you have to have a conversation about this when their emotional needs are not active. Huge tip, will be revolutionary and transformative. Does that make sense? You don't have to have the conversation about her emotional needs while she's emotionally needy. You can have a separate conversation. And this is what we learn in couples therapy, is that they have a conflict on Thursday night. And on Tuesday morning, they're in my office. So we're talking about the emotions at a time when the emotions are not active. This is the first, most basic, simple thing that most people need to learn about relationships, is that you can have conversations about conflict when everyone is calm, chill, and feeling good about themselves. The problem is we try to fix the problem while the house is burning down. And that makes it 10 times harder. Because any kind of feedback that you have when she's feeling insecure, any kind of feedback that you have is going to blow up in your face because she's going to feel even more insecure. Couple of other tips. Okay, his first thing is separate out the conversations. Don't have it when she needs emotional reassurance. Have it when she's in a good frame of mind. Next tip I'm going to give you, really simple stuff that we don't think about with conversations. How are you positioned? If you're having a conversation with your partner about something like this, do not sit across from them. That is the default positioning, right? So like, here's how it goes. Like, hey, babe, we need to talk. And then she's like, right? You sit her down like, hey, like you're sitting on one side of the table, she's sitting on the other side of the table. Maybe you guys go out to a nice dinner. Babe, we need to talk. You take her to a nice restaurant, put her at comfort. She's actually paranoid. You're across the table, she's across the table. Don't do that. No sitting across from each other. Sit next to each other. Other thing, hold hands while you have the conversation. OP technique will completely transform how you have conversations. I almost think that if we want to see like more real political dialogue instead of like flinging insults at each other, during debates, instead of two people standing on podiums, they should be sitting on a couch and holding hands. It'll completely transform the political dialogue. Guarantee you. It's transformative. So if you're using words that are harmful or that may trigger her, you can use other things like your body, right, which sounds kind of weird, to reassure her. So you can hold hands, you can do other kinds of whatever's like appropriate in your relationship, right? Like whatever feels good. Like you don't do something weird, but like whatever feels good to you. And sit next to each other. That's number 2. Now what we're going to do is map out actually how to have the conversation. And what I'm going to try to do is anticipate some of the things that you're terrified about. Okay? So, I would start by asking an open-ended question, like ask her, like, how do you feel about yourself? Herself. What do you like? Do you feel like I love you? And ask a couple of open-ended questions about that. Right? So just like try to get a sense of where she is. And remember, like if you're sitting next to her and holding her hand, like chances are she'll say, yeah, I feel like you love me. Then you're going to ask her a question. So sometimes you get into this state of mind where like you need me to reassure, like you need me to say I love you over and over and over again. It feels to me like I have to convince you that I love you. So you can use I statements. Okay? It feels to me like I need to convince you that I love you. How does that feel to you? Do you feel like I don't love you at certain points? And then what we want to try to do is invite like some degree of curiosity around it. It's like, how do we understand that? Because right now, we're totally fine. But then like last Thursday, we weren't totally fine. Like, how do you understand that? Do you think that I love you one day and I don't love you? Or do you think it kind of persists? Like, how do you think that works? Because what we're trying to do is engage them in like an understanding of their thought process. And this, by the way, is this is sort of what we teach our coaches to do as well. Okay? Because like she doesn't realize what her mind is doing. And so in the same way with coaching, like you don't realize what your mind is doing. And so how do we get you to understand what your mind is doing? We ask you like some non-judgmental questions about it, So like, hey, I sometimes feel like I have to convince you. And then what's going to happen is if you ask questions, you've got to be a little bit careful because you could trigger a defensive reaction where she says, what are you saying? You don't love me? Or that could be how it looks, or it could be something else. Okay, fine, I'll stop. I know I'm emotionally needy. You don't deserve that. We can break up. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you've actually dated one of these people, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Where it's like you say one, like, thing, and then, like, it triggers this, like, we can break up. No, it's okay. You deserve someone better. No, like, right? Like, and so that, you don't want to play into that. Now, then what happens when they do that? Oh, no, baby. No, no, no. I love you. The only one for me. And then GG, noob. Wrecked. Wrecked, son. Your bitch ass thought that you could get by without reassuring me. I'll show you. Bet you get your bitch ass up and reassure like you've never reassured before. I will teach you a lesson for trying to take away my reassurance. Okay, so when this happens, you don't want to fall into the trap. Okay? You're going to say, what are you hearing me say? How are you feeling right now? Right? So hopefully you're sitting next to her. And like you're holding her hand and you're like, it seems like you're really hurting right now. Like, what did I say that, and like, how are you feeling? Like, help me understand. Do you feel unloved? Yeah, I feel like you deserve someone better. You don't deserve me. And so like, you just want to kind of sit with it, right? And like, this is the key thing is that when the partner needs reassurance, you need to teach them how to tolerate the emotions and like kind of ask them like, what have I said to you that makes you think that I don't love you? Well, you're pointing out how I'm so emotionally needy, even if that's the case. So now we're going to use the next technique. So partner says, I'm emotionally needy. You deserve something better. That's when you're going to pause. Instead of going to reassurance, no, like you're, oh, baby, I love you so much. Oh my God, baby. Don't say that. You're breaking my heart. You don't want to do that. What you want to do is say, is it okay for you to be emotionally needy in a relationship? Well, no, it isn't. And it's like, well, I think it is. Like, even if I deserve something better, I want you. So you don't want to play into it. You kind of want to like question, like, is it okay for you to be emotionally needy? It's totally fine for you to be emotionally needy. And you kind of want to like be neutral with it, right? So you don't want to play into it and go into the reassurance, but you also don't want to like accept their view of things, which is very black and white, by the way. So you want to kind of stay in the gray zone. It's like sometimes, and then this is kind of weird, right? Because you've never said anything like this. Sometimes I do feel like you're emotionally needy, and sometimes I have emotional needs too. And sometimes, this is going to be devastating, right? So you got to go slow, maybe over multiple conversations. I'm having this conversation with you because I think it's important that both of our emotional needs get met. And sometimes I feel like reassuring you is emotionally exhausting for me. And then what is she going to do? OMG, break up with me. I'm such a bad person. My emotional needs mean that you're not getting your emotional needs met. And this is where this is where it gets tough, okay? So like, I'm not expecting y'all to be able to handle this. This is where you say, that's sometimes true. That's why I'm bringing it up. I don't want to break up with you. So now you ask a question. When we have a problem in a relationship, how do we handle it? Is the solution to problems in relationships to replace the person until you find someone perfect? This is the fundamental thing that people who are very dependent do not get. And it's not their fault because they were taught that problems aren't worked on, things are replaced. Because they learned somewhere along the way that no amount of effort will fix something. They learned all kinds of weird things. And so the angle that you want to take is like, actually, we have a problem in the relationship. I agree. What I want to do is work on it with you because I love you. I want to build this relationship. I think it has all the foundations of the perfect relationship, and I want to move towards that. Will you help me? And now we do the reverse Uno. Because now who's the helper and who's the helped? Now you've got to be careful, because then this is like, this can very easily go to here. It can very easily go back up here. Will you help me? Oh my God, you deserve someone who's able to help you and participate in the relationship instead of the dead weight that I bring. And the insecurity will re-arise. So be aware of it, right? It'll use whatever. It's like water trying to work its way through a roof. It'll find whatever cracks it can. So that's where you're like, no, I can't fix this on my own. And I'm asking for your help. And if you feel like you can't give it or you don't know how to give it, then that's what we need to work on too. But whatever problems we have in this relationship, like, we're going to fix them together. Okay? So like, this is a tricky conversation to have. But the basic issue is that there's an emotional need in one person, which the other person has to fill. And so once you get to this point, now it's like both of y'all are contributing. And the fact that you have an empty box over here, even the presence of this, the acknowledgement of this, the idea that you have an emotional need that is not being fulfilled will trigger all of this insecurity. So be ready for it. And then there are a couple of other techniques that you can use. One is if they say, oh my God, you want to break up with me? And you can say, no, I don't. And they say, yes, like, no, you want to break up with me. You want to break up with me. Then you can ask them, I'm having trouble because you'll sometimes say things like, you want to break up with me. And then I'll say, no, I don't. I don't know how to convince you that I don't want to break up with you. I don't know what to say. Because they're going to ask for more and more and more stuff. And you can say, I don't know what to say. And what you're doing in that moment is you're sort of shifting some of the responsibility on them to hear your words. Because the whole reason this happens is because when you use words, they are not hearing them. They're rejecting what you say. No, you don't really love me. You don't really love me. No, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't. And so then you have to push more and more and more and more and more. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. So they need to take responsibility for listening just as much as you need to take responsibility for speaking. But that's not what we do. Right? So being in a relationship with someone who is dependent or has some kind of dependent attachment style, whatever, can be very, very challenging. It's emotionally draining. And the tricky thing is that even if you acknowledge that it's emotionally draining, you feel guilty. And you feel like, well, like, of course, like, if this poor person has been abused and traumatized and like, I love them, we're dating, you know, like, I want to make them happy, and I can make them happy. I just have to tell them 16 million times that I love them. And so if I don't do that, then I'm like responsible for their happiness, because that's what a dependent person does. They make you responsible. I'm insecure. Reassurance. Who's in control of whether you feel loved in that moment? The person who's reassuring. So how do you approach that? First of all, don't have a conversation when they're triggered. Sit down and say, hey, I want to talk about something, right? So that's ominous. There's something I want to work on with you. Like, I'm trying to figure out how to do something better in this relationship. Sit down next to each other. Hold hands. Use body language. Talk to them about emotional needs. hey, the other day you were feeling like pretty unloved. And I was having trouble communicating with you that I do love you. I said it like 5 or 6 times. I've said it 1,000 times, but sometimes it seems like it doesn't sink in. Can you help me understand what's going on in those moments? Do you feel loved in this moment? And then like a broader question of like, if we have a problem in a relationship, how are we going to manage that? Is it okay for one of us to not give each other what they need? How do we approach problems in a relationship? Is it just replace the person until you get the perfect thing? Or do the two of us work together to build something? And that's really what you want to go for. Because once you get to that point, then she's taking some of the responsibility, you're taking some of the responsibility, but most importantly, y'all are on the same team. It's not like there's a giver and a taker. It's like co-op now, right? You're no longer being carried. One person's being boosted, one person's doing the boosting. Great for the person who's being boosted. So you need, and if you want to have a healthy relationship, it's got to be both y'all working on problems together. And that involves acknowledging particular things, but you've got to be super, super careful. Because if you're working with someone who's very insecure, they'll jump to a preset, factory-produced set of insecurities and deficiencies. It's like the chicken nuggets of insecurities. They'll be like, I'm this, and I'm this, and I'm this. That's not what you're asking about. You're asking about, hey, when we have a conversation and I tell you I love you, why is it hard for you to hear that? I know, I'm so stupid, I'm so broken. No, I'm not. What are you hearing me say? Let's slow down. Even now, I'm running into the same issue where I'm trying to have a conversation with you and your mind keeps jumping to a particular place. That sounds like a judgment, right? Kind of is. And then you can say, I feel, and now I'm noticing, oh yeah, I'm stupid, like, oh my God, because it's a judgment. And then you're like, this is the challenge I'm having, is now I'm saying things that are hurtful to you. I don't want to say things that are hurtful to you, but I'm struggling to communicate. What are you hearing me say? How are you feeling right now? Right? And like, if you chip away at it, hopefully you'll break through. Now, sometimes what people actually need is therapy, right? So some of these relationship skills, we can kind of armchair quarterback, amateur style, totally fine. But sometimes your partner may actually need to see a therapist, like especially if we're dealing with like real bad insecurities, y'all may need to see a couples counselor, something like that. So absolutely a possibility. But I still think that I've seen immense progress with just a couple of these tips, and to understand this complex of how reassuring someone actually makes them more dependent on you. And so over time, it gets worse and you feel more emotionally exhausted. So hopefully this will help. Questions? Marquand is saying this is some high level stuff, plus you need a lot of patience. Absolutely. This sounds terribly confusing to navigate if you have autistic tendencies. Also, absolutely. Yeah, so people are talking about if your partner has 2Is, I think if you have trouble with social cues, it's important for your partner to understand that and be more direct. There are plenty of people who are great at compensating for that kind of stuff. Perfect. Love it. Tofizi and Heliquin. So I think that's where, like, that's what I'm kind of saying, is that y'all need to have a meta level conversation about how are we going to communicate about needs. And one thing that can come out of that is, like, sometimes we may need more directness, or sitting next to each other and holding hands may not be enough of a social cue. Yeah, and Night Nerd is saying teaching her that she cannot pull the parachute. I love that phrasing. On a serious discussion, that way, that means she'll need to learn to communicate, and it's just not going to work out. Communicate, absolutely. So that's what happens, is people will pull the parachute on communication. They'll trick you into the reassurance trap, and then y'all are nowhere. So you've got to be able to tolerate the insecurity. Both y'all can tolerate it together. Dr. K, could you act out an example of this kind of conversation with one of the mods or coaches? Sure. I don't know if I have that role-playing skill, but I think this is what our coaches are kind of trained in, right? So what they're going to do, so like, here's what happens. You're struggling in life. And then you're like, oh, woe is me. And then generally speaking, two things will happen. People will either reject you. They're like, what are you complaining about, noob? Or they'll reassure you. They'll say, oh, like, it's fine. Just live up to your potential. Like, here's a list of things for you to do. Neither of those will help. So what we do in coaching, which is like similar to this technique, is like, hey, we're in your corner. But when your mind starts going all haywire, we're going to understand it. We're going to tolerate the waves as they come on. We're not going to react to it. We're not going to slip into YouTube. We're not going to slip into doom scrolling. I'm not going to tell you that everything's going to be okay because I'm your coach and I have no idea if everything's going to be okay. How are you feeling right now? Overwhelmed. Okay. Totally get it. Let's understand it. Let's tolerate that instead of needing to make it go away. I can't handle it. We're going to sit with it. And it's easier to sit with when someone is sitting with you. Then we're going to start operationalizing. Okay, these are all the feelings that you have. Well, no wonder you can't apply to college again after dropping out. Like, look at all this gigantic pile of feelings. How do we get you to apply? Now that we understand the feelings, now that we can sit with the feelings, when you look at an application, even the thought of opening an application brings up all the shame of failing out last time. But now you've learned how to sit with it. So on Tuesday at 3 p.m., you're going to work on your college application. Great. DM me after you're done. How do you feel about it next week? I feel great. I finished my first application, then I finished 6 others. And the coach is like, great, slow down. And then the client's like, oh my God, wait, what do you mean slow down? I did 7 of them. Hold on a second. You were driven by emotions when you couldn't apply to a single one. What is driving you to apply to all 7? Oh my God, that's why I get really excited about something and don't have any follow through because I'm still giving into my emotions. Absolutely. Let's not do that. Let's be grounded in a tranquil mind, decide what we want to do, operationalize it out, and execute it on it in a calm way. And right now, not saying that you're going to get this in the first session, but first session's on us. So if y'all want to give it a shot, give it a shot. Recognize that this takes time, right? So you're going to have to sit with them a couple times, but give it a shot. The first session is really going to be about mapping things out. I don't think they're going to, transform you in one session. That's not what our outcome data shows. 8 to 12 weeks is really what it takes. But for example, by 12 weeks, 25%, people feel 25% more confident in their career trajectory. They feel 58% more direct, like in a positive, they have 58% more purpose in life. And earlier as well, we did a post about confidence, right? And I was kind of saying that like, everyone's like, be confident in yourself, but no one teaches you how. So all of those thoughts in your head that chip away at your confidence, you need awareness of those thoughts. Where do those thoughts come from? How can we catch them in the moment? How can we keep them from doing the things that we need to do? Because coaching is ultimately about accomplishing your goals. So first session's on us right now. Feel free to check it out. We're really happy with, generally speaking, the performance that we've seen. It's part of the reason that we've scaled up as we have. We've had clients in now 77 countries, and we see like good outcomes. We've had 5 or 6 curriculum revisions. So what we tend to do is study our program, recognize where we can strengthen it, and then make curriculum changes. And so we're like, this is one thing that I think is really missing from the field of therapy. I'm not saying that coaching is similar to therapy, but what's happened in therapy is like, you don't get any feedback, right? So we don't use like analytics in therapy. And that's part of the reason why therapy is has such problems. So I was talking to a group of therapists the other day, and I was asking them, how many of y'all have had a patient who will come to one appointment and then never show up? And like everyone raises their hand. How many of you know why? And people start giving you answers. They're like, oh yeah, like they just weren't ready for therapy, or I don't know, some people just don't have time for it. Like, I guess they just like, I was like, I didn't ask why you think they didn't come. I said, how many of you know why? I was like, how many of you called the patient afterward, tracked him down, and were like, hey, like, can you help me understand why you're not coming back? Like, is it something I did? No one does that. No one does it, right? For some good reasons, too. There's a certain amount of patient privacy kind of stuff where we don't want to hound them. Hey, why aren't you coming back? Why aren't you coming back? Why aren't you coming back? And if y'all have been to a therapist before and you went once and you're like, yeah, I don't think this person is for me. Did you call them and say, hey, I felt like A, B, C, and D were wrong? And I think this is what therapy needs. Because we don't know why patients don't come back because we don't ask. All the data we have is on the people who show up. So part of, I think, the reason that our program has been pretty successful is because we get feedback from y'all. You know, I'll make a YouTube video and someone will post and say like, hey, I'm done with the community. I love a lot of what Dr. K says, but I think he was way off base here. That's useful feedback, right? And we get the feedback that we shared with y'all today. Hey, thank you so much to everyone in this community. I've quit smoking for the longest period of time I have in 5 years. We get feedback and we incorporate all of it. So if y'all want to check it out, first session's on us. Hopefully it'll be helpful. And we are oh wow, it's 3 o'clock. I gots to go, chat. I got to do better on time. We can't talk about Warhammer and meditate in the same session. So I'm going to do better on that. If y'all are interested, so here's the other thing. We have about a dozen more meditations in Dr. K's guide to ADHD and doing stuff. So if y'all are like missing out on the meditation, I'm not trying to say it's there's a bunch of meditation over there, but you know, if y'all have the guide, just hop on over and meditate there wherever you want to. I will teach you over there. But we do absolutely want to get meditations going here again. We've done a very bad job of that. So I'm going to work on that. That's going to be my goal. And who do y'all want to raid? Frankie Artsy saying, I'm binging the guide. It's awesome. Good. I was honestly so worried about this one. It's quite different. We can raid Bobby Scar. Let's do it. Is it a capital B? What's his... Is it Bobby Scar Speaks? Okay, we'll raid Bobby Scar. Hope Bobby's doing well. He's playing Ghost of Tsushima, so high skill stuff. So I'm glad to hear that y'all are binge watching the guide. I mean, it wasn't designed to be binge watched. I thought it was kind of dense to binge watch, but if that's what works for you, go for it. One thing I would strongly recommend if y'all are binge watching is like definitely do the worksheets and stuff. When I tell you to pace things out, like pace it out. Your brain needs time. Your neurons need time to like wire and prune and things like that, right? So like do the exercises, especially if you want to. I'm guessing that we'll see a greater degree of change and improvement with people who go slow and do the exercises. But, you know, you can watch it twice. So take care, everybody. We'll see y'all on Monday.